welcome everybody. I'm aware that some people are still coming in, but we have a packed agenda. So good afternoon and welcome to the Performance, Finance and Customer Focus Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency proceedings that are applicable to the Council House. And the assembly point is on the other side of the Harris fencing in Guildhall Square. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it's switched off when you're not using it. And also that your mobile devices are turned to silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the chamber and during the course of this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. Due to the number of people potentially at the meeting this afternoon, thank you for moving to the council chamber, we have asked for the heating to be put on. And for members of the public, this is a council committee meeting. It's councillors who have the right to speak. I'm very glad you're here to witness our proceedings, but please treat the meeting with respect. Helen, have we got any apologies today?
Chair, we've had apologies from councillors Churchill, Stevens and Vincent, and councillors Lugger, Toohey and Lang are substituting today.
Thank you. Do members have any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare? Councillor Bryasdale, then Councillor Harrison.
My employer, the Four Greens Community Trust, is mentioned in item 11, so I will not be speaking on that item. Thank you.
And my employer, also Four Greens, is mentioned in number 11. Thank you.
Councillor Partridge.
I'm a non-executive director of Four Greens Community Trust.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No? Good. We have 4 sets of minutes to work through today. That isn't because we've got 4 massive amounts of meetings left to do. It's that we've been quite busy over the last few months and they've all come here. The first of those, and I'll do them one at a time just for ease, is the Select Committee review held on Monday the 7th of November to explore the Armed Forces Community Covenant on its 10th anniversary and the plan for taking it forward. Not everyone in the chamber sat on that because obviously it was a select committee, but are people happy to accept that those are a correct minute from the meeting for those of us who were there? And I think, Councillor Lugger, you and I were the only ones in the room who were there. Councillor Shea, who was the cabinet member there, has also said he's happy with them. People are happy for me to sign those? Thank you. The second was our meeting on the 18th of November. Which was the call-in decision meeting. People happy that those were a correct record of that meeting? I'm not hearing any objections. Are we able to sign those as a correct record? Yes, thank you. The next one was our standing meeting on the 30th of November. And I've checked all of these minutes before. People are happy with those as a set of minutes? Thank you. And then our additional meeting on the 14th of December, which we used to catch up on a number of items, including ones that had come up as needing to be addressed. And removing some of the things from the select committee list. People happy that those also are a correct record of that meeting? Thank you, George. Everyone else happy? Great, thank you. I will initial and sign those during the course of the afternoon for you, Helen. I have no items of Chair's urgent business, and therefore move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an appeal against the petition response. Emma, I think you're presenting this as our monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. Committee, before you today is a report in relation to appeal that's been submitted following the petition that was debated at Council on the 30th of January in relation to the Mardaway trees. You will note from the report that the committee are asked to consider the appeal and determine whether the response from Council at that meeting was appropriate or not, and therefore how committee feel about that. To give a little bit of background, the appeal is appended at the report, page 61 to 62. This was received and the rules require it to go to the next available committee, which was this meeting today. Behind that, appended at page 63 onwards, is the petition guidance. And just to give members a quick overview of what that states, paragraph 2 outlines what a petition must include. Paragraph 3 talks about the acceptance of the petition and its validity. Paragraph 4 lists possible responses to a petition. But crucially, and I'd ask members to note, paragraph 6 requires that wherever a petition has over 5,000 signatures, there's an automatic referral to full council for debate. In this case, the petition submitted did indeed have over 5,000 signatures. As such, under the petitions guidance, officers were required to forward it on to full council for debate. The only other alternatives would have been if it had less, or it would have been considered at scrutiny, and if not, dealt with by officers if there were fewer than the threshold for scrutiny. As such, the petition was presented to council on the 30th of January. It was, when received, it was submitted and checked for signatures and numbers in order to determine where it should be dealt with. That was undertaken by an officer in terms of plotting the postcodes and determining whether they were in a reasonable area in terms of Plymouth City. So it's not just a Plymouth City postcode, it looks at wider areas where it might commute in and out of the city, etc. And that determined that there were 5,000 valid signatures plus. It was submitted to the council with further information, which was included as part of the email. However, that was not included as text on the online petition. And when we refer to what is part of the petition, that is what people are reading and therefore signing in support of. As such, the Word document that accompanied it, which was not part of the petition, was not included in the papers because it didn't form part of the petition that people were asked to sign in support of. However, at council you will be aware that petitioner had 5 minutes in order to present their case to council and make any additional representations that they required at the time. Members will be aware today that you were sent an email from Straw Plymouth with some points, and before I open it up to committee to debate the item, I would like to pick up on a couple of those. Firstly, on the 14th of February, Straw were informed by email at 18:34 by myself that the matter was on the agenda and a hyperlink to the item was sent to them. So they were made aware in good time that it was going to be considered and the nature of the report that was before committee. As explained above, because the petition had 5,000 signatures, this meant it was an automatic referral to council. Officers could not make any other decision other than to refer it to council for full debate. The petition appeal and the subsequent correspondence refers to the fact that they request a referendum. It wasn't within officers' gift to do anything other than refer it to council, and I must stress that point. That's what our petition guidance makes clear. Secondly, they referred to an appeal submitted to myself on the 30th of January, just in advance of the council meeting. This was rejected, and this was rejected on the basis that when you refer to paragraph 6 of the petition's guidance, the appeal is against the response, and the response was to be formed by council at full debate. So when you look at the wording of paragraph 6, it makes that clear. As such, the response to the petitioners was that in advance of any decision by council, there was no response to the petition to appeal. As such, the appeal wouldn't be taken forward at that point. Finally, in terms of the briefing paper, it's appropriate that officers prepare a briefing paper for committee. It was prepared to give members the facts in terms of the history of the matter and in terms of the governance arrangements We wouldn't ordinarily engage with any other external parties in relation to the preparation of a briefing report. Finally, before I hand it over to committee, what I would say is in terms of what's available before committee today, it's the same as was available before council. So committee need to be aware that in terms of if you were minded to look at the recommendations that council made, all committee could do is make further recommendations to cabinet. I need to stress that the carrying out of the function in relation to the development is a cabinet function, and therefore all committee and council at the time could do is make recommendations for cabinet to consider. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma, and I think you've covered everything, so unless Councillor Stoneman, you particularly want to say anything, but I appreciate you being here. I'd like to say that we are today looking at an appeal on process, and so I'm not intending to open the entire petition back up to debate because that has already been debated by Council. I will give opportunity later. Can I finish, please, Councillor Kelly, because I haven't instructed you yet how I'm going to handle this debate. I will give you opportunity later to make comment on other matters, but I first wish to address the 7 items that have been raised as the key matters for appeal. I will do those one at a time. As I introduce them, I will give members an opportunity to say whether they wish to speak on that one issue. I will list you and go through you. As with budget scrutiny, I will ask you to try and keep all your comments into one comment and include all your questions in that one comment. And we will then go to officers to deal with anything you have raised before I go on to the next people, so that we try and handle this in an orderly manner. Therefore, before we come on to talking about anything that from the council debate itself, we will do 7 rounds of the individual items raised in the petition before we move to anything else. Are people understanding that? But I will say it all again. On page 61 of your pack, there is the petition appeal. There are 7 items there raised as the reasons for appeal. I will address them one by one. So the first round of people to speak, I will ask, will be for issue 1. And I will ask for any comments on issue 1. I will ask people to speak once and to include in that any questions or comments they might have. I will allow a follow-up as long as it is purely to clarify information given by officers in response to the question. Once everyone's had their first chance, if there is a second and time is looking okay, we will go for a second round. Once we've done number 1, we will go to number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then, Councillor Kelly, I will give opportunity for any comment on whether the action from Council itself was appropriate, and then the final round for whether there are any other comments about process on petition. So we are going to do 9 rounds, but the first 7 will be to specifically address the issues raised in the appeal against the petition. So the first of those relates to whether the petition could have not been any more precisely worded because of the information available. Does anyone wish to raise any comments or questions on reason 1 for the petition appeal? I have Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say you've jumped in straight away when I put my hand up to say that I'd like to speak. I would appreciate a little bit more courtesy and respect, please, from you, Chair.
Councillor
That's the
Kelly.
first thing that I'd like to put on record today for the minutes, thank you. With regards to point 1 of this appeal, we're going to go through it, as you said, you're the Chair, section by section, but it's a very sad state of affairs that we as councillors that represent the public are now, in effect, looking at an appeal. And section 1, or appeal 1, about the wording, we've heard from the monitoring officer, people that write in aren't legal experts, and the ethos and the spirit of the wording, I think, was quite clear in what was trying to be achieved. To potentially pick out salient words or words that weren't included, I think goes against the spirit of what we're trying to do as elected members, which is to represent the public and the very people that we're here to represent and listen to. And if at every juncture it's not quite 100% technically correct, I don't think that is instilling the trust and the spirit of what we're here to do. So my comments, for one, are that the petition was given in. Whether people signed specifically for the extra wording, I think goes against the spirit of what was actually trying to be conveyed. And the reason that we're here, Chair, jumping ahead, is the very fact that we don't seem to have honoured or respected the 12,000 or 11,000 signatures on that petition.
Councillor Kelly, we are here to hear an appeal that has got very specific things. I am the chair of this committee, and in line with the Constitution, my rulings will stand on how this debate is covered. I have set that out. Emma, will you please confirm that the petition received and signed was the exact same wording as the petition that Council debated, and that you did not in any way change the wording of the petition that was received and that people signed?
Yes, Chair, I can confirm that when the petition was submitted, there was petition wording and there was an accompanying Word document that didn't form part of the petition. The Word document that didn't form part of the petition wasn't included. However, the petition wording was included in full with no amendment.
Thank you. So we can confirm that for everyone who signed the petition they signed was the petition debated by Council.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on point 1? Councillor Wheeler.
I'm not quite clear why you're asking if the petition was, if the petition placed before the council was the one that people had signed. In the context of paragraph 1, one is not complaining that there's any difference between the wording presented to the council and the wording that was signed. One is saying that the wording couldn't be more precise because data which should have been available was not available.
I agree with you. The reason I asked the question is that that's what Councillor Kelly was raising as the issue. And I wanted to have assurance for members that the petition we debated was the petition that was submitted, because that is what we could debate. So, Councillor Wheeler, you raise a valid point that the petition wording here is that the petitioner didn't feel they knew the facts and therefore weren't able to make the petition better. And that is what I'm asking on anything, not about whether the petition was the petition or not, or whether supplemental should have been provided or not, but the point. Emma, could you confirm again, subsequent to the petition being submitted and that being put in the written papers, what opportunities the campaign group had to present anything they wanted to say to full council?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the petition was given 5 minutes to present it to full council in terms of adding anything to what was already included in the petition.
Thank you. So whilst not being able to be precise with the information, the petitioner had the opportunity to speak direct to members to bring that information up to date. Is that what you're saying, Emma? I just want to be really clear about these on yes and no answers.
Yes, absolutely. So had anything occurred between the petition being submitted and the point at which they were able to present it, they could have used their 5 minutes to explain anything that they felt necessary to explain.
Anything else on point 1? On point 2, that the petitioner was prejudiced because the full data was not available. Does anyone have anything they wish to say on that particular point? Councillor Wheeler.
Well, just that it does appear to be accurate.
Thank you. You might wish to reflect on that when we come to later recommendations, but I just want us to all be very clear what we are actually responding to in terms of the appeal before we come on to any recommendations to Cabinet or anyone else. Point 3 is that petitions, particularly when involving large and complex issues, can't necessarily be drafted properly, and therefore the 12,000 people who've signed the petition have been prejudiced by a narrow interpretation of the terms of Petitions Guidance Clause 8 of the Constitution. That clause specifically is about how a petition can be appealed. The appeal is that the petition was complex and people were prejudiced, as we've previously discussed, and therefore the interpretation of the appeal process is wrong. Does anyone have any comment to make on that? Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Pemberley, I'd just like to say, based on the previous comment that I made that would relate to this, we're dealing with lay people who will not be overtly familiar, as we're not, with regards to this appeal process and the process you're going through. We'll do our best to raise points, but it's in the spirit of what we're trying to say here. So I agree with them there that we can, interpretation of a set of rules can go one of number of ways, and therefore to interpret as the council have done may be different to somebody that's not as well versed trying to get an understanding. But this is about public confidence and public interaction with us as elected members.
For clarity, Clause 8 is available on pages 64 and 65 of your pack. I suggest that people open it to that so that you can be very clear, because this could lead to recommendations, why point 3, where people have been prejudiced by the interpretation of Clause 8, which is what has been to be done if the petition has not been fairly handled. Are there any comments on that? It is particularly relating to words in our Constitution. Councillor Kelly.
So I've taken your guidance and I'm looking at page 64, 4.1. The response to...
Sorry, no, this is specifically in the appeal relates to Clause 8, which is at the bottom of page 64, moving on to page 65.
And that's what we're doing today.
That is what we're doing today. I just want to go through the points in the petition the petition appeal before we come to any further debate, so that we are all clear where we stand on the constitutional basis of the appeal and the grounds that it have been caused on. So that we can then move on to the next stage, so that we are very clear in this and everyone is very clear about the process we have gone through when they're either watching in the gallery and listening, or watching later, or now online. So we move now to item 4, which is the result of what happened to the petition. So it is the lodging of a petition of this size could have been welcomed as an opportunity to fully engage with the public through the means requested in the petition submission, for example, a public meeting. We've already discussed the petition submission as opposed to the petition in earlier points. It then goes on to say that the council might want to rely on an overly legalistic response to the wording of the petition to shut down proper public debate on the controversial issue. And had the council wished to construe the petition submission in a less restrictive line and in line with the purpose behind Clause 8 of the Constitution, it could have done so. Clause 8 of the Constitution we've just looked at, which is the appeals process. What I think is underlying this, and I might be wrong, and I'll just put my 2 pennyworth in, is that they the complaint is based, the appeal is based on the fact that the council made one decision about route for this petition to take rather than considering a range of routes in its response. I think that's where they're coming from. I'm trying to unpick, like everyone else, we're not lawyers and we're trying to work this through, but I think that is the underlying thing. Councillor Kelly.
So, Councillor Pemberley, that refers back to page 64, 4.1, where there are a number of responses that can be given to a petition of that size, and it gives you the various options there with regards to a referendum, a consultation, a public meeting, etc. So I would be very much in agreement with the point that they have raised there. There were far more solutions and avenues to go down than the one that the council ultimately went down.
Before I come on to you, Councillor Lowry, Emma, I think you addressed the routes for what happens to a petition earlier, but could you remind us about when a petition is received, the other clauses as well as 4.1 that deal with what we have to do and the decisions officers have to make?
Thank you, Chair. So when we receive a petition, the first thing to establish is how many signatures are on it. And dependent on the number of signatures there are will depend upon where it goes to for a response to be formed. In this case, paragraph 6 is relevant. It had over 5,000 signatures, therefore for a response to be formed, it must be by full council via a debate. As such, it was then open to full council to determine the response. Paragraph 4 does list a number of responses. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's not a list by which a decision maker is compelled to follow. But the position is that it's the appropriate decision maker that considers the response. And in this case, it ought to have come to full council for a debate, as it did, for full council then to determine the response.
Thank you. So, in effect, section 4.1, whilst being a list of options, is superseded by section 6 if a submission is over 5,000 signatures.
Yes, Chair, absolutely.
Thank you. A supplementary, Councillor Kelly, quickly.
Through you, Chair, can I ask Emma then, so the petition is numerically based with regards to whether it gets a full council debate, but if we look at the scenarios on page 64, 4.1, could the I suppose, motion that was put forward by the Cabinet member have offered up the fact that it could have been a public consultation, could have been a public meeting, could have had further inquiry or research, but that wasn't an option that was put at the full council meeting. And with the greatest respect, Chair, to us all, we went to that council meeting and we listened. None of us are particularly experts in all of this legalese and which clause supersedes whatever. So again, for public transparency, it would have been nice to have had the full options available to be properly discussed. And for the record, I voted against it anyway. But today, this is about confidence.
Councillor Kelly, we are not at this point rehashing the council meeting. We are looking at specific points of the Constitution and how it is applied. Who voted what, who said what, is not what is being debated at the moment. What is being debated is the basis of this appeal, which is on a constitutional basis for constitutional grounds. We will later look at what the results of that were, but before we get there, we are doing this. That is my ruling. I'm now moving on.
Yeah, so 4.1 then, could Emma answer, could those options have been included then? That's a simple yes or no.
Hang on, please, through me, and please remember your microphones because they are needed in the chamber as well as for the online. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. Councillor Lowry's right. The proposal put to council could have been based on whatever it was the proposer decided to propose. Likewise, members had the opportunity to put forward any amendments to that proposal that they saw fit during the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry.
In all fairness, Emma has answered all the questions that I was looking to raise. Bear in mind, in the years that I've sat on this council, only one occasion has the council debated a petition. So therefore, we're all relatively new to it. And this is the second occasion from memory. And I'm sure at the end of this exercise, there will be lessons to be learned. The list in 4.1.1 and so on and so forth is a list that is relevant to the necessary scale. I could get a petition in my ward by 6 people signed, and obviously I'm not going to bring that to full council. And as to what full council does, if you read 6.2, the will of the council can do pretty much whatever it likes, subject to it being legal. So the list is not exhaustive. We could have chosen to plant 4 times as many trees if we wished to, but if those amendments didn't come forward from members, regardless of how they voted, then they're academic.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lang.
My question is for Emma, just around the weighting given to these options in 4.1. No one option is more effective, or the order they're in. It's just picked a number of options, and you said anyway this isn't an exhaustive list in any event. Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, Chair, yes, there's no weighting. They are options. I didn't draft the petitions guidance, so I'm mainly familiar with it as you are in terms of the list there, but my understanding is there's no weighting to it. Would they be appropriate for every petition? Absolutely not. As Councillor Lowry said, dependent on the numbers, what the topic is, etc., some of those options may not be appropriate. I assume they were given in guidance as possible options for members, but in reality it's for members to make a decision based on the petition in front of them.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry.
Just wanted to recall from my memory banks that the level of signatories required at 5,000 was set by Cabinet and subsequently by Council, and therefore can be changed if we felt the need to make a recommendation to that level. That was from memory, because it was something about 25,000 was the top level one, but we chose the lowest level one to enable more people to engage in the process. But I may well be wrong. It was about 10 years ago we did it.
From memory, you're right. There were I think Councillor Toohey, Councillor Wheeler, you and I were probably the only people in the chamber at the time when formerly Mrs. now Councillor Bridgman presented a petition where they got 35,000 signatures, and they'd gone over the top because they had to guarantee at least 25,000 valid wet signatures in order for a petition to be debated. And at that point, you were right, that Council determined on a review of that process to bring the number down as it seemed unreasonable, following feedback from the petitioners. So, we can do things, we can't do things during a process, that we need to do those in a measured manner, which is why we will have a chance to debate the process of petition as part of this as well, to learn from it. Item 5 on the top of page 62. And I think I will ask questions, but I think we probably need some guidance here. Is that there is a clear conflict of interest in the Council dealing with the petition submission when the petition relates to the Council's decisions and behaviour. Now, this is probably a matter of law and who is supreme in any one decision. As the Council's lawyer, Emma, I am going to ask you to define at which points the Council makes decisions and at which points other people make decisions about Council decisions, because I think that is quite important for people to understand before we move into any debate on this particular item.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to this particular issue, the Armada Way scheme and everything connected with it is a Cabinet function. It's only for Cabinet and Cabinet members to take decisions in relation to it. The petition came to full Council. Full Council is not a decision maker on this matter. Therefore, it can take it not having considered the matter any further. I consider it's wholly appropriate that Council looked at the petition in light of it not being the decision maker.
Thank you. And a request that if you speak, can you move towards the microphone, because they're not picking it up properly for the broadcast. So some of your comments aren't being fully heard. So when you speak, please lean forward. Does anyone want to say anything about item 5? Councillor Brysdale.
I just wanted to clarify or ask a question to clarify one of the points that Emma has just made, which I think is really useful for the public to be aware of. You know, it's been great to see the scale of engagement involved in this, and there have been understandable questions around processes involved. So from this moment on, with regards to Armada Way and the dealing with this particular appeal, could you just confirm that the decisions around how and when the process of Armada Way scheme rests primarily with the Cabinet of the Administration? A lot of the referring in some of these clauses refers to Council more widely. Thank you.
So yes, everything in relation to the scheme is a cabinet function. It forms part of the Transforming Cities Fund, for which, agreed with government as part of the submission, is a governance matrix framework. So decisions on the TCF project more generally are taken in line with that, and that was agreed by cabinet and agreed with government as part of the funding.
Thank you. Any more comments on the conflict of interest issue? Item 6 is that the council should have been given opportunity to consider the range of responses in clause 4 and which were requested in the submission. We've already dealt with the submission and we've dealt with clause 4. It says the very narrow way that the council has construed and dealt with this petition is severely damaging to public confidence in local democracy. Councillor Kelly.
For the record, Councillor Penberthy, that's what I stated earlier when I alluded to 4.4, 4.1, as much as we can look and we can read all papers, but I mean, we've got this quite late today. The bottom line is, had it been more transparent with regards to the options open, council may have taken a different route, and that's, to my mind, what is being alluded to there. So I agree with that point.
Any more questions on section 6? Point 7 doesn't specifically have a question in it. It's more a comment on the process and the outcomes. And so I'd like to move to break that down into 2 points. So I'd first like to talk about generic process for handling petitions, and then we'll move on to the result of the discussion, and I will get some guidance from Emma before we move into that section. But given the discussion we've had and our experience of councillors in this time, as Councillor Larry said, we don't have many petitions, and in fact no one can remember any petition ever having been appealed before, so we are all working a bit blind. Are there any comments that councillors would like to make around how the council manages petitions? Councillor Lowry.
I don't wish to repeat what you've just said, Chair, but as always in life, there are lessons to be learned, and I think here's a great opportunity for us to pick up on the concerns of a very complex issue that has caused some difficulties in our communities and for the administration. And I think there should be some form of a sub-working group set up in the new municipal year to look at the issues that have been rightly raised here for us to consider in respect of not only the policy around petitions and how they're dealt with, but also the appeal process, because this gives us an opportunity to learn from an exercise that's recently been carried out. So I'd like to recommend that for discussion at some stage, please.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, then Councillor Brasdell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on what Councillor Lowry said, as I stated earlier, none of us are experts. This is a first as to what's been said, an appeal of a petition. The petition was one of the largest that the city has seen, but I think it would be beneficial for all members of the full council to have perhaps had a private briefing as to what the rules and regulations are, so we go in and can have a more meaningful debate, because we are fully aware of the options, the route, and how it all fits together. And of course, this was just one item on a very, very heavily agendaed full council meeting, and to try and absorb and take so much in is very, very difficult. So in order to restore public confidence and faith in the procedures, it's our understanding and questioning ability with the options that are open that I think need to be improved so that the public have far greater confidence that when such a petition is debated and it has got an awful lot of public interest, we don't end up in this appeal situation, because had things have been done differently at the council meeting, I'm sure possibly this appeal wouldn't have come in, and therefore it would save time and effort going forward.
Emma, from memory, and this is me trying to remember back a few meetings and quite a lot of bundles of papers ago, the petition paperwork debated by council did include the guidance from the Constitution on the petition, or am I wrong? I'm getting mixed
I will
opinions.
need to check that, but what I was going to say in response to Chair, if it's okay, is that we can certainly ensure that when the petitions come in the future that it is either hyperlinked or appended to the item, say that it's there for members in terms of laying it out and making it accessible.
Thank you. And I suppose this is a reminder to all of us as members that as members we work under a constitution and we are all responsible for doing so and understanding the constitution. I would encourage all groups to ensure that if their members don't, that they do avail themselves of Emma's use to explain the constitution and its findings. This is one appendix in the constitution and we need to understand the way the full constitution works and interrelates. Councillor Lowry, Councillor Brasdell.
Thank you. I agree with what Councillor Lowry said earlier, and actually I think we can go further than what Councillor Kelly's just advocated, which is rather than just a better understanding of the current constitution, we can all acknowledge that actually there have been points where perhaps we need to look at whether details in the Constitution are fit for purpose on this. And so to add to Councillor Lowry's point, I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate to mandate the monitoring officer to work with the Audit and Governance Committee to look at this section of the consultation, to review it in its current position, so that we make sure that some of the questions and misunderstandings around this don't happen in the same way again, because we all want our local democracy to be effective and for people to feel that they understand how to engage with that. Thank you.
Thank you. That sounded like the beginning of a recommendation in good language. We actually have both the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee sitting on our panel. Both have indicated, so I'll go to the Chair and then the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's been a number of items centred around the Constitution recently, which might mean A&G will have a full review of the Constitution in the next municipal year, and I'll be happy to spearhead that with the Vice Chair. The other point is I will be making recommendations to Cabinet on the 6th of March from A&G, and I'll be very happy if it is a recommendation, Chair, to put that forward.
Thank you. And just for clarity, Emma, if I know that Audit and Governance have recommended that we see papers and we see them all the time without it going through Cabinet. If we were to make a recommendation to Audit and Governance, it could do so without going through Cabinet. So we could do that direct and save you a job, because we could give it to you now, Councillor Lugger, if that is the will. Councillor Lowry.
Councillor Lugger is entirely correct. We have agreed to carry out a review of the Constitution. It is a very big document and it has lots of subsections to it, one of which is this petition itself. I don't know where this petition sits from a constitutional perspective, i.e. which chair would take it forward, but I would suggest over and above what we're attempting to do in audit and governance in respect to the Constitution, there will be a need for a number of subgroups to look at specific pieces of legislation, policy, which this is one of them, and it will require members from a whole breadth and depth of the council to do exactly that. But yes, we'd very much welcome the continuation of that recommendation, please.
Councillor Finn.
I take on board the issues with regard to the Constitution, obviously looking at petitions and that are made, but I also think we could take a step further back than that and try and prevent us actually finding ourselves in this position again. And I say this with regard to possibly structures with regard to consultation, to make sure a lot more aspects are covered in a consultation period or a set consultation period before a decision is made to remove any doubt thereafter. Chair.
Thank you. Any more speakers before I try and sum up that section and get the, I think, 2 recommendations out of that before us, before we move on to then the findings of the council itself, because I think I'm trying to logically take us through a minefield, and it's a bit difficult to do, but forgive me. So I think from there we have 2 bits. One is a mandate to the monitoring officer to work with the Audit and Governance Committee on a review of this section of the Constitution, ideally through the establishment of a working group beyond just the Audit and Governance Committee membership, in order to move this forward in advance of any broader piece of work, because this could be moved forward as a standalone within that constitutional review. So that was a recommendation that I think mingles the bits that were said by Councillors Brierdelve, Lowry and Lugger. Do you 3 think that I've managed to catch the bits you've said? Does one of you wish to propose that? Councillor Brierdelve, is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Lugger, are members happy for that recommendation to go forward? Please show. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Any abstentions? Any against? Interesting. I am abstaining as chair on this one, purely to try and ensure I'm seen to be managing a fair process. Okay, so that bit is passed. The second is that we make a recommendation to the Audit and Governance Committee that within the constitutional review, consultation and engagement processes are properly defined in order to support transparency and democratic process in the city. And I think that picks up on what Councillor Finn said as a thing to be looked at. Are you happy with that?
Yes, happy with that, Chair.
And are you happy to propose it?
I'm happy to propose it, yes.
Is there anyone seconding? Councillor Lowry and Councillor Tofan both put their hands up very quickly. I'll leave you to choose which one of those, Helen. So once again, a vote in favour of that recommendation to Audit and Governance. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And once again, I'll abstain as chair on this one. So that is carried. So in terms of process, we've got through to the end of that bit. And I know that I'm now running over time, and officers are just going to have to work around that this afternoon, because I think it's important we give this time. So in terms of the appeal on process, I'm drawing a line under that unless anyone else now wishes to say anything about process. No? So what I now want to go on to relates to an earlier page in the document. And we have it in, I think, 2 places. And this relates to actually how the council responded, because the appeal both commented on process but also the response that was received. Obviously, council is council and has made its decision, and we are now being asked to review that by the appellant, and we have received guidance that we cannot instruct but that we can recommend. I think we need to do that on the basis of at the time of the council's meeting, because otherwise we're continuing to muddle the waters considerably. On page 59 of our papers, we have the full text of the response approved by council. On page 53, we have the specific actions that the council requested of the cabinet member. So we have both of those there. Obviously, that was subject to a full discussion at council. We don't have full council here, and I'm not intending to fully redo that discussion. It was long and it was heated. However, Are there any comments or suggestions that people wish to make around that process? Councillor Kelly.
It's not so much the process, it's the 59 is the response that you've asked us to comment on. The last paragraph, which Council voted through, says Plymouth City Council calls upon the Cabinet Member for Transport to note its dissatisfaction with the lack of public engagement. So it's that statement that was voted through at full council, and the whole spirit then would be following that meeting, that would be rectified. But sadly, that has not proven to be the case.
Councillor Kelly, I did say that this is based on the time of the council debate, not on the actions since. Because we are looking at the response provided by council, which was at the council meeting. We cannot comment on what's happened since because the council was not aware of what happened since, so couldn't have engaged in that in the debate. And my understanding is that whilst a process is underway, the response from that process, which would include any of this, has not yet been published. So we are looking at this not at what has happened since the council debate, but at that point of the petition presentation, because that is the bit that we can comment on in terms of recommendation to Cabinet and Cabinet members.
Through you, Chair, as an elected member, whether you choose to disregard my comments or feedback is entirely up to you, as you've done so far throughout this meeting. But I am at liberty to say what I would like to say, full stop. And the bottom line is the reason this appeal has come in is based on the inaction following the full council meeting.
That whether that be or not be, that is not what was in the gift of us as a committee to address today. And I'm trying to follow what the Constitution tells us to do. Councillor Kelly, at any point you are able to say things within the context of a council meeting, you're subject to the rulings of the chair. Some of your suggestions have gone forward today and have been reflected on. You wish to debate what was going on during the meeting, and I've given this opportunity. For those watching or listening, Councillor Kelly has left the chamber during this exchange, and I'm going to now carry on with the meeting. So, are there any other people wishing to comment? Councillor Wheeler.
I'm not sure that I'm raising this in the right time, or even if I should raise it at all, but during the debate there was a request for information on whether the DFT had agreed to a delay in the delivery of the project. It seems to me that if we are going to put any constructive proposals forward, we need to know that, because there would be little point in us saying that we think the council should do such and such if the project has to be completed by whenever it was, the end of March or whatever. So I think I'm not raising this in accordance with the way you're dealing with it, but I think...
I totally get where you're coming from, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Wheeler. I think you're trying to be constructive in helping us to make recommendation rather than just to make comment on things that we probably all have opinion on, and which weren't at that point debated, but this was raised in the debate. Emma, I'm not sure whether you know whether approaches have been made to the DFT.
I don't, Chair, but Paul Ballard is here and I'm sure he'll be able to address that if required.
Paul, would you like to come to a microphone that is switched on and answer? If you're watching publicly and Paul's name appears as something other than Paul, please forgive us.
Thank you, Chair. The position remains that the Transforming Cities Fund programme was due to be completed by March this year, so that has not changed. There is something called a change control process, which relates to any scheme within that overall programme. Some of the projects within the Plymouth Transforming Cities Fund programme have been the subject to a change control process, but Armada Way had not, on the basis that obviously it had commenced. And in addition to that, and this is I think goes to the heart of the concern that perhaps Councillor Wheeler has, is that all of the TCF programmes across the country are currently being reviewed under what is called an assurance review process by the DFT, with a view to considering what time frame those projects should now be delivered to. But as we speak today, the requirement of the original grant award was that those projects should be completed by March 23.
And just to be, that's a completion, not a commencement.
The basis of the grant award was in relation to completion. Self-evidently, in light of the various macroeconomic and other changes that have occurred in the last 2 years, that is not going to be the case. And that is why I think the DFT have triggered what they call the assurance review across all the TCF authorities across the whole country.
Councillor Wheeler.
I was going to ask if, again, it came up at the council meeting, had we requested a delay, but I think if all projects are going to be reviewed as a matter of course, would I be right in assuming that there was no need to ask for a delay because it would be reconsidered anyway? Or am I being optimistic there?
Well, I obviously can't second guess what the DFT will say, but clearly they are aware of the broader context of projects being delivered in the last 2 years. It is possible, of course, that they could seek some or all of the funding back for projects that are not delivered. So there is undoubtedly a risk that some of that funding may be clawed back by the DFT. But we've had our interviews with the consultants who've been appointed by the DFT, and that process is now going to involve them reporting back to the DFT, and the DFT will then have to take a view as to what they say to all of the TCF programme authorities in terms of the delivery of projects that have yet to be completed in the original programmes. And you'll appreciate that we have a number of TCF projects at various stages, and of course that will be the case across the country as well.
Councillor Wheeler.
Still not 100% clear, Chair. Would it have been wise, or would it be wise now to request an extension of time, or rather than assuming that the project is going to be considered for extension and then find that it wasn't?
Chair, through you, my advice would be that the assurance review process has been commenced. A report is being prepared by DFT consultants to the DFT. The DFT will be making a decision at some point, we anticipate, before March. So I think my advice would be that a decision is going to be made by the DFT on this matter one way or another relatively shortly.
I think I'm clear now. Thank you.
And just picking up on that, because I am trying, despite what might have been inferred earlier, to be constructive. Whilst that process is going on, there would be no harm in us maybe requesting the cabinet member to write to the minister requesting an extension of this particular programme. Would that be... I'm currently working with Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Kelly. Would that be something that you might find acceptable, Councillor Wheeler? So, picking up from the floor, would people like us to add to the list a recommendation that we request the cabinet member to lobby the minister for an extension of the funding window when he is going through the assurance programme, or they are going through the assurance programme? Councillor Wheeler, am I happy to put you down as a proposer for that? Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lang. Those in favour of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I will abstain again. That is passed. Thank you. That's the first bit we will do. Emma.
Can I just clarify that that is the Cabinet Member for Transport?
Yes, the Cabinet Member for Transport. Sorry, yes. Councillor Stoneman is here as the Cabinet Member for Governance because we are dealing with a governance issue, but the result of that will be a recommendation to other members of Cabinet. So that is our first additional recommendation on that. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I was putting my hand up. I don't know how else I can ask to speak without putting my hand up, so that's why I put my hand up. I came in after a comfort break. I wanted to ask Paul Barnard a question following on from Councillor Wheeler's questions about finance, and I appreciate you asked for an extension. But through you, could we have some clarity with regards to the number of DFT projects that have just been discussed throughout the country have potentially been delayed or not started? And I just wondered whether...
Councillor Kelly, that's really going beyond the scope of this into
I
the
wanted
work
to
of...
understand whether we were very much an outlier, that if 99% of the DFT funding, the projects have been started and finished in line, or whether actually we were part of 99% that was still in abeyance.
I think it was said that the entire programme is doing, which implies that the entire programme is having some difficulties. But if we're going to talk about entire programme, that entire programme would be the purview of a different scrutiny panel, and I suggest you ask Councillor Riley about it. He chairs that panel, and he has been looking at city centre renewal under that process. That does not pertain specifically to what we are discussing today. Councillor Lowry.
I entirely agree with you, but in the interest of trying to move things along, Councillor Kelly can, of course, ask his question in relation to the finance papers subsequent to the agenda further on anyhow. So bring those issues up there, and I'm sure Mr. Barnard in the interim will do his very best to provide that information to us.
Thank you. In terms of the recommendations that are on page 53, or actually the full report on page 59, or the detail on page 59, does anyone else wish to raise anything else regarding the council response to the petition at that date, and given the information and knowledge that everyone had at that date? Councillor Lowry.
So you're going to let me get away with this, because I'm not looking forward, but I'm looking backward, in the sense that I think it's slightly disappointing that we got to this stage. There should have been a number of trigger points before we got to full council and before we got to a petition, where there was much more constructive engagement with the people who were concerned and had created a petition. So there's a greater understanding and dialogue between the various parties. And I personally don't feel that has happened sufficiently. So once again, there are lessons to be learned. And once again, when we come to doing the review of the petition, part of the petition before that there should be a proactive engagement by the council to address concerns at an earlier stage, as opposed to getting to a cliff edge where you've got to debate a petition in full council. That becomes a challenge to us all.
Yeah, and I think that has come up as a theme today. I am listening to what everyone says. I'm trying to restrict it into the right time points. I think we cannot require the Cabinet Member to do anything. I'm not voting in this debate, but I did draft a motion that was moved by Councillor Briers-Delve, and the initial draft, I think Councillor Wheeler, you seconded it, our initial draft did require, and we had to change that to request, and we had required in our initial draft an apology. Now, obviously, that motion was withdrawn so that we could bring the city centre back to our next meeting because of technicalities under the Constitution. In this text, it does come back to only saying that we called upon the Cabinet Member for Transport to note the dissatisfaction with the lack of public engagement. We didn't ask for the Cabinet Member to do anything else but that. Given the comments, does someone wish to request the Cabinet Member for Transport apologise? I'm not seeing anyone say yes.
I wasn't suggesting that necessarily, so that's perhaps a separate issue. But if we are going to look at the Constitution and a subgroup look at the petition, there is an element of work within that looks at the way the council undertakes consultations generally, for instance, because I think we all collectively are of the opinion that what happened previously wasn't sufficient.
Yeah.
Hence, we got to this point. So,
Yeah, I think that was the second recommendation we approved under process, as well as petitions. We asked specifically for consultation and engagement to be considered as part of the consultation. Councillor Wheeler.
I think this is probably why we've got to this sad situation, because I'm not as familiar with the entire process as I think you are. You're a ward councillor, so you would have been fully involved in whatever processes did go on. I've been fully involved, I think, in the St Budo issues, and they're equally unfortunate in my view, on a much smaller scale, of course. We are dealing with two problems which are entirely outside our control. One was that the consultation process, consultation that was carried out during the COVID period, so that I'm not sure whether it's actually during, well, it can't have been during a lockdown, but in one of the periods between lockdowns. That would have prejudiced actually holding any meetings. So I know what happened in St Budo. There was an exhibition in the library. In fact, there were two exhibitions because there were two separate consultations on two different things, which are closely interwoven, but were consulted upon separately. The other issue is the timescales were very tight. The Transforming Cities programme didn't assume that you had your scheme ready, but you had to have your scheme complete within a very tight schedule, and that's not a good way of organising a major capital programme. And I don't know whether we would like to request that the government in future looks at longer or realistic timescales for the processes of dealing with capital programme projects. But I think it would help. But if other people may not. And the other thing is, if we have very strange circumstances, like the pandemic, that does mean that ordinary processes are likely to be prejudiced, and perhaps longer timescales are needed for full and adequate consultation to be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll look to Paul probably just to nod or wave or something. In terms of this particular programme, I think the assurance scheme, from what you indicated, was to take account of the specific issues around COVID and construction and everything else that have hit. So on this scheme, it's covered. I think if we were to try and take from this petition a response on government capital programming as something from here, that might be a stretch of considerable magnitude. So maybe not that, but I think the assurance scheme is around the recognition that this scheme has been hit by COVID, Brexit and banking crises, and impact of all of those on the construction industry. So we do have that extension, and we already have that recommendation for an addition to say that Councillor requesting the Cabinet Member for Transport to write asking for specific thinking to be put to Armada Way. Anything else on the response of the Council? Emma, could you just guide us as to what we now need to vote on? Because I know this is complex. Sorry, Councillor Kelly, then Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Kelly, I think this would be your 8th or 9th intervention, so we're giving you plenty of time, but can you wrap everything you need to say up in this one, please?
With regards to the council response, does the committee feel that it was very explicit with regards to exactly what was going to take place following that response?
No one has raised anything in terms of that and the requests on page 53, which can only be requests. So at the time of the meeting, the amendments moved and everything else produced a list which the council voted on. No one has proposed any changes to that list other than the request for a delay. And I did check, but I then called you after I'd called Emma, and I'm now calling Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wheeler, did you want to add anything?
You mentioned we're moving to a vote very shortly, and I'd like to comment on why we're in this sad situation. I think a number of people, clearly 12,000 people, and me as well, I didn't sign the petition, feel that the scheme that is being proposed...
Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, this has been expressed a number of times, and we're not here to rerun the entire council debate. We are here to look at whether the response was appropriate. We have talked about process, and we have made recommendations about process for the future on the learning that has been talked about around this afternoon in terms of what members felt went wrong. I'm trying to be an impartial chair here. I think my opinions on what went wrong are on the public record already, but I am aware that we are going through a serious process this afternoon. Rather than giving you the opportunity to restate everything that people have stated.
Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to satisfy you, and we're dealing with the agenda item as it is. But this issue is not going to be satisfied with the legalistic and procedural resolutions that we're talking about. I think people think the scheme is contrary to our proposal, to our policies, and that's the basis of dissatisfaction. Now, whether we can do anything about that is...
in trying to be fair, we are listening to an appeal against a petition. We haven't seen the results of the engagement process, and I know there are opinions about the engagement process. We haven't... there are other opinions that have been expressed, and we are dealing with an appeal against how one of those was dealt with. And that's what I'm trying to keep our focus on here, because otherwise we go back into that full council debate. And I'm sorry, there are 57 elected councillors and there are 13 of us in the room. I think if we were to go back to that full debate, it should be a full council debate, not just a scrutiny panel debate, because that would be the appropriate thing to do. And there might well be other opportunities, who knows, but we are dealing with this particular appeal. There have been lots of people's opportunity to speak. I know not everyone is happy with what I've done in terms of chairing. I'm trying to chair us through a process of an appeal, not a debate on a topic, and they are two very different things. The one bit we have had in terms of an amendment so far to the council was specifically asking the cabinet member for transport to write to the DFT. I'm now going to once again ask Emma to brief us on what we now need to vote on, and whether it's 1 or 2 votes and how we do that, just so that everyone is very clear about what we're going to do. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. You've already had 3 recommendations that you've prepared, that's been proposed and seconded and voted on. So what I would suggest is that for completeness, you formalise, assuming there's no further recommendations, that your response to the petition appeal is that there's an additional recommendation to the Cabinet member as you voted, and that in addition to that there are 2 further recommendations to be put forward to myself as monitoring officer and audit and governance, and then take a vote on the matter.
Thank you. Are people clear what they will be voting on in a moment? Councillor Lowry.
Chair, I'm going to be a bit more basic because, Emma, forgive me, I didn't hear all that very clearly. Maybe doing the legalese a bit fast for my brain. Perhaps, Chair, you might quickly just remind committee what the 3 recommendations are, please.
Yeah. So in terms of process, Helen, did you get exact wording, or have you got? You've got notes. So the wording was, Tom, you had the first bit, which was that we would mandate the monitoring officer to work with the Audit and Governance Committee to review this appendix of the Constitution to learn lessons from this, and we recommended in that a subgroup be set up beyond just Audit and Governance membership in order to take that forward. The second was that we asked Audit and Governance, as they undertake their constitutional review, to look specifically at consultation and engagement processes so that those are clearly defined and understood. The third was that in terms of the response of Council, that the Cabinet Member for Transport write to the Minister, request, as part of the assurance process, specifically requesting delay on the Armada Way scheme. Councillor Harrison.
Only because I've written down some of it, and I'm not sure if it was added into that first recommendation, about making sure that prior to debates, that petition guidance is issued to all councillors so that we're fully aware of the options.
I think that's probably been noted by Emma to form part of the debate that working group has, because that will need to be part of the constitutional process to make sure that it has always happened and not forgotten, predominantly because so far petitions debated by council seem to be once a decade. And, we change monitoring officers and democratic support officers and everyone else in that process. So I think Emma said she had that reporting, so we got that, but I think as an inclusion. Anyone else on anything? Does everyone understand we are voting on that is our response to the petitioner, and those recommendations will be sent to the various other people who have engaged. Okay. So we are now going to, I'm just keeping my eyes open because hands have been popping up, but I'm now going to go to the vote. So those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I will continue to abstain as I have through this particular debate. So that is carried. A response will be sent to the petitioner within 5 days. We will make sure that those recommendations are sent as quickly as possible, given the time-limited nature, especially of the one to the Cabinet Member for Transport, and it will be published in our minutes in due course. I'd like to thank everyone for keeping your concentration going during that debate. We took a lot longer than officers and I had planned for it in order that we could try and understand, because it's complex. I'd also like to thank the patience of those who've come in the gallery to listen to this. It is very technical on what is, I know, a very emotive issue. Thank you for your understanding and patience and good behaviour. We don't always get that from members of the public attending, and I certainly appreciated it as I tried to chair that debate. Okay. I think it could probably do a 10-minute early break now. We might have an additional break, and that means we might run later than 5 to half 5. But I think we all need to just clear our heads before we move into the next round of engagement. So we will come back at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
I can update you on is that in terms of the number of voter ID applications, that 130 has risen to 162 as of today. I think you might like to be aware of that.
Just out of interest, what's the estimate as to the number of people in Plymouth who don't have appropriate voter ID?
I can't remember the exact figure, Councillor, I'm afraid, but it certainly was in a small number of thousands, I believe, rather than hundreds.
Councillor Harrison.
Just on that point, I was made aware that actually things like the bus passes were going to be available for ID, voter ID, for the voter ID. So if that's the case, then obviously there'll be a number that won't be applying for the registration. They'll be using bus passes, etc.
Yes, I think when we discussed this at a previous panel, there are lots and lots of options for pensioners, and other than almost a driving licence and a passport, almost no options for young people. So a student identity card isn't acceptable. So there are a number of people and they've got to be photo IDs. So I know last week I presented 28 people with their citizenship paperwork. They weren't photo IDs, so that wouldn't actually qualify them to take it to a polling station. I had heard rumour of some 4,000 people in Plymouth who might need, I think from last time, I think that was the figure we were given, 8,000 we were given at our last session on it. So 131 out of 8,000 does imply that that's almost 8,000 people who might find it difficult to vote. So whilst it's good that there's something happening, somehow or other we need to get that message out there because it will be people across the whole of the city in all of our wards who might not find it easy to vote. Councillor Lugger.
Just to give you an update on that, Chair, the Ordnance Governance Committee have a subgroup that's working on monitoring this problem, and there will be a report forthcoming shortly, but it is under review.
Thank you. And I think it's important that the democratic process is able to function as easily as possible. And the more we can do to support that across the council, I think the better. So it's good to hear that's being looked at. Anything else on the policy brief?
Just one last thing, Councillor, just to say that obviously there's a lag between the policy brief being published and the meeting taking place. So just to say there was one other consultation that was published on Friday that members might be interested in. There's going to be a consultation on the council tax valuation of HMOs. This relates to a government proposal that they should all be rated on an aggregate basis, and in various parts of the country this is not currently the case. So I just thought members might want to be aware that that was out there.
Thank you. Is it possible for you to send us a separate note on that, because this committee won't be meeting again until the next municipal year, and I know actually if it's possible to send a note to all members, because HMOs are an issue across a number of wards and some members might want to put some member comment into that as well.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, Ross has just said he'll put it in the bulletin, so if you can get it to him in the next day or so, it can go in this week's bulletin, which would be very useful. So thank you for that. Anything else on the policy brief? No? Thank you. Moving on to the Finance and Capital Monitoring Report month 9, which I believe went to Council. I'm getting a nod. And certainly budget scrutiny has happened since this as well. So there's been a number of times to talk about budget, but does anyone have any questions on the financial monitoring report? Is there anything you wish to draw our attention to, Councillor Share?
For yourself, Chair, I would just like to report that we continue the pressure on the budgets, and it's an ever-improving figure. And I do believe that we will achieve a balanced budget by the end of the year, or balanced figure at the end of the year.
Thank you. It's one of the things I know we've been looking at hard, so I appreciate that comment. I'm not seeing any other hands up for the budget. So moving on to the corporate plan performance report. Apologies this was late. It is the very latest one and has only just had CMT sign off. I hasten to say it's not been to Cabinet yet. We are the first committee to get a look at it. So over to any questions on the corporate plan performance report. Councillor Brasdelv. Your microphone.
Apologies. This is a question specifically to Councillor Shea. I just wanted to ask, sorry, just bear with me one moment. Yes, this is in the supplement pack, and I just wanted to ask a question regarding what it says about recycling rates. So on page 6 and 7, if that's useful for people's reference. It concerned me that the drop in the percentage there between Q2 and Q3. And so I just wanted to touch upon the fact that the administration took the decision late August to end garden waste collection earlier than promised. And that was communicated quite last minute to residents. And here in this report, it suggests that the recycling, reusing and composting rate dropped from 37% to 31% between Q2 and Q3, and that is primarily due to that particular decision. So I just wanted to ask Councillor Shea whether you accept that your administration's decision has directly slashed our city's level of recycling, as the report would suggest. If not, whether there are any other factors that you think have contributed to this significant change. Thank you.
Through yourself, Chair. Thank you very much for that question. Yes, I do consider that it has made a minor effects on the recycling rates within the city. However, one thing that I would like to emphasise further is so many people are working from home these days, and I don't believe that the levels of recycling are publicised sufficiently or promoted sufficiently within the city, and as a consequence of which we're getting a significant level more of mixed waste. And when you actually go round and follow behind the bin trucks, that's quite evident in there, that people aren't seeming to recycle as much as they should be. Those that are diligent, very much like myself, it is going well, but there are a lot of people out there who I think are working from home and just chucking general rubbish in the general bins, irrespective of whether it's recycling or not.
Personally, I don't agree that this is a small change. This is a 6% drop within a few months. So on the scale of the city, I think that's very significant. And also, I don't think it's fair for us to put this, solely on individual residents. I think, we have a responsibility as a council to look at this systemically. We've repeatedly, or this administration has repeatedly missed the current 39% target over the last year. And presumably you're aware that the council is committed to a 65% target by 2034. So do you personally believe that as a council we're on the right track to having to over double our recycling rate over the next 10 years?
Through yourself, Chair, I definitely recognise we need to do better.
Councillor Lowry.
Chair, I'm referring to page 28, which is item 1, FTE full-time equivalent days lost due to staff sicknesses on a rolling 12 months. If you refer to the table there, Chair, we can see quarter on quarter, there seems to be a continued increase in lost days due to staff sickness. And the report rightly points out some of the issues and the reasons for that. And we're consistently missing the target, which may well be for very legitimate reasons, but it would be great, it'd be good to understand at some stage as to exactly why this is consistently happening. Are we an outlier as Plymouth City Council, or is there a generic issue as a consequence of illnesses post-COVID. I know from my own experience and looking around the chamber, a number of us have been ill on a lot of occasions for a considerable period of time. So I'm not in any way sort of trying to blame anybody here. But equally, we know full well that the NHS and access to GP surgeries is quite a challenge for us all at the moment. I'm just wondering if there's some merit in doing some work to greater understand the reasons why we are consistently missing the target, and that is continuing to increase.
Through yourself, Chair. Councillor, yeah, I totally agree. There is a good argument here to be far more granular in our understanding of the reasons why our levels of sickness are still creeping upwards.
I've got a couple of things I want to raise. Before I do those, has anyone else got anything they wish to raise? No. So the first one I'd like to talk about is on the summary sheet, it's the residents who think people of different backgrounds get on well together, which has gone from green to red with a big downward trend. The detail is on page 18 of the pack. And basically the drop is from 50, the question is the percentage of city residents who think their local area is a place where people from different backgrounds get on well together. It's dropped from 55% to 42%, and the suggestion is it's because of COVID neighbourliness. I'm sorry, I think that might be a trite answer, because COVID neighbourliness was about neighbourliness, not people of different backgrounds. The reason I'm flagging it now is I don't think Councillor Shea you're realistically going to be able to answer that, but we are talking with the Community Safety Partnership about hate crime later, and we are talking with the Cabinet Member with responsibility about equalities and diversity. That drop is really worrying when we're thinking about community cohesion and the city as a positive place for everyone to be. And I just wanted to flag it now so that we can inform later. I don't know whether you have anything to say, but it's not your area, so I'm not expecting you to.
Chair, in answer to your question, briefly, and it won't be a full answer, as you know, but we have Councillor Smith coming along later on today. However, I do believe that we have two community builders amongst us in here this afternoon, and I'm hoping that that programme will be instrumental in bringing about some greater community cohesion, especially amongst our ethnic minorities in the city. And I'm always interested in catching up with those community builders and finding out what their experiences are across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. And it's good that we have people with practical experience sitting on the council. We actually are all part of our communities and engaged in them in lots of different ways. And when I look at that, I'm quite worried. I represent the most ethnically diverse ward in the city, and I can't see obviously my ward figures there, but that I think could merit some thought. The other one I wanted to look at was really as a reflection back on the debate we had before the break. The residents who know how to get involved in local decisions has dropped from 34% to 27%, and those who don't know, those who really feel off, have gone from 38% to 42%. So not only have we seen a drop-off of those who were positive, we've seen an increase in those who were negative. And once again, we've got community builders in the room, it's not here, but I do think that for audit and governance, given that we've got the chair and vice chair here, we do need to think about how as a council we are seen as democratically accountable and how people are able to engage, and the Constitution does require us to do that. And the Constitution is long. Previously, when there was a review, there was a suggestion that we remove the preamble, and I resisted that, and it's still there. If nothing else, I do recommend that we read the preamble, because that tells us we're here for the people of Plymouth. We need to do something, I would suggest, to the Audit and Governance Committee when you do your review to make sure we take the structural steps necessary to reverse that decline and ensure that people in Plymouth are able to engage and know how to engage, because otherwise we're just going to end up with more processes where we end up with conflict rather than people pulling together. And it's just a reflection, as I saw that figure there and saw the agenda, that there was a bit of a correlation. So it's not a specific question or anything else, but a perspective. And Councillor Share, I can see you nodding and wanting to say something.
However, Chair, gratefully received and understood.
Councillor Kelly.
It's okay, Chair. You've just raised the point that I was going to raise, very pertinent with regards to public democracy and engagement and the right that they feel that they can express their views and be listened to and get a corresponding reaction and action from their council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more on the performance report? No. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us the very, very latest one. You might want to reflect on some of our thoughts when you take that to Cabinet, Councillor Shea. We now move on to the Strategic Risk Update Register. We received this under the request of the Audit and Governance Committee in order that it is able to inform our discussions. And so we don't expect to see substantial change from meeting to meeting. If there is, I'm sure Councillor Shea will tell us what that substantial change is and why. But it's more, are there things on this that we need to be thinking about how we discuss at future meetings? And don't forget that our next agenda item on cyber security is because Councillor Partridge pulled this out of a previous risk report. So, this does inform our work programme. So, any thoughts on the risk report or anything we might need to look at from it in future meetings? Councillor Wheeler.
So, I'm taking you're inviting us to look at individual risks.
If you think there's an individual risk we should be looking at and we're not, then please do.
Number 11 is on page 96. Council having insufficient workforce capacity and resilience to deliver the required range of services. There's a number of bullet points down there as to why this is a problem, but seems to me the obvious one is omitted, and that is pay level. We had a problem with refuse lorry drivers a year or two ago. I don't know whether we still do, because competitive rates were so much greater outside the council than we were able to pay. And I wondered if there was a reason why we didn't mention pay as one of the problems of recruitment and retention.
Councillor Shea.
For yourself, Chair. Councillor, specifically, we didn't exclude pay for any specific reason whatsoever. We look at the broad range of reasons as to why our staff retention is at the levels that it currently is, and obviously we look to encourage our staff retention because that's the best way to get best value for the people of Plymouth.
I'm just looking around because I think it's a valid question, especially given the current social climate. Can we leave it with you, Councillor Shea, but could I maybe ask that the Audit and Governance Committee, next time they get the risk register, do put some consideration to issues of pay and conditions for staff retention, just in terms, you're the owner of this in terms of members. Councillor Harrison, then Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this sits with it or not. I'm just, obviously we know we think about staff retention. Where do we sit in terms of apprenticeships within our workforce? Obviously we've got apprentices within City Council, given budgetary constraints at the moment. Is that something that may also be about staff retention and whether or not people feel comfortable or feel that there maybe is going to be a place for them, if the budgets are stretched and maybe therefore looking elsewhere?
through yourself, Chair, and we look at all methods of encouraging apprenticeships and do employ apprentices across the whole range of the workforce, as advised by, recommended by Scrutiny. It is something that is key to our people strategy.
And maybe worth adding to the list, the fact that on this one item there are potentially two big things there that could be good mitigations or worth considering as mitigations are. It's what Scrutiny's here for. Councillor Lowry.
Chair, I think we might start getting confused as to which committee is responsible for what. The Audit and Governance Committee does have overall responsibility for the Strategic Risk Register. The whole point of the Audit and Governance Committee now sharing that risk register with this committee as an example is for you to see items on the risk register that are relevant to your Scrutiny Committee, and therefore there might be items that you wish to take forward outside what the Audit and Governance Committee does. So therefore, in respect to Councillor Widder's comments in respect to pay for item number 11, the Council's insufficient workforce capacity, it might be something for you as a committee, you and me, as a committee to consider in your work programme moving forward if you so wish to do so. Because we in the Audit and Governance Committee would simply point out that this risk is increasing, decreasing, or whatever it may be, and therefore we'd ask others to do a piece of work on that subject matter, which in this case would in fact be this committee. Is my view, but I might well be wrong.
That's right. We will seek some guidance outside as to who should maybe have the first prod at the issue, but I think there probably is an issue about us having a better look at the mitigations against workforce sufficiency and capacity, what that might mean for apprenticeships, in-house development, paying conditions, other bits and pieces, because that is a big issue going forward. We won't necessarily allocate it in this meeting, but if people are happy, we will make a comment that will either be referred to Audit and Governance, or we will put it on our work programme after this meeting accordingly, because I think there is some stuff that's been raised here that is valuable for us to consider. Ross.
Chair, there is one meeting of Audit and Governance Committee left in the cycle for the municipal year. We'll be undertaking a review of the Strategic Risk Register in the next couple of weeks in advance of that meeting. We'll make sure that we question the validity of the mitigation as expressed in the document.
Thank you. I think it is important we just triangulate this and come up with the one place that's going to do it, but at the same time that we don't ignore it, because I think and that's a good suggestion, because I think then Audit and Governance might well then say, please will you do it, and we can add it to our work programme. And if it comes in, Helen from Audit and Governance, can we just add it to our work programme? And if they say, we'll deal with it, we don't need to put it on, but we don't need to wait for the next meeting of this committee to add it. Councillor Shea, if you need to stand up or move, don't feel you have to stay sitting. I must admit, I've had a bad back. I did one board meeting lying underneath the board table because I couldn't stand or sit. I will take whatever you need to do for your bad back comfort. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. It's just looking at item 19, risk of failing to deliver the range of housing to meet Plymouth's needs. We've gone from green to amber. I think that's the only one that sort of moved in that way. The whole point of having a risk register is to try and get as early intervention as possible before the problem exacerbates and gets worse. And clearly, housing delivery is quite a long-term nature by the very fact it takes a long time to get planning, build it, etc. So all I would ask is perhaps whichever relevant committee that could be put on a work programme so that it's perhaps nipped in the bud rather than it appearing time and time again, and then somebody decides when it goes red, well, perhaps we should do something about it, because that time lag will have a huge detrimental effect on ever getting that back to an acceptable rating.
Housing is split, isn't it, from memory across, is it two panels or one looks at housing?
Through you, Chair, I mean, I think there's
another does another part.
Yeah, and I think through the scrutiny review, we've been advised to look at how some of those terms of reference work. So yes, absolutely, it could fall between two. Doesn't mean that we could have a select committee or various ways of looking at it. I think it's Councillor Kelly's raised a a very valid point, which it was expressed as well during budget scrutiny, wasn't it? So those recommendations went to Cabinet and were approved, so would expect a greater focus on Plan for Homes in the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So Helen, if when we get to it, Plan for Homes goes on to our work programme, and we can work out then through Scrutiny Management Board, or if the scrutiny review comes through, but whatever, we can make sure it's allocated for the next municipal year. Don't see it. Oh, Councillor Wheeler.
I'm afraid I had a couple more, Chair, if I may. 18, again on page 96, the problems that might stem from the Environment Bill. We've commented on, there's been comment on recycling rates. I'm fairly sure that separate collections of food waste is something that's going to be required in the Environment Act. I assume that's part of the scope of the ongoing work, but could we perhaps be? I think waste comes under our preview.
No, it's actually Councillor Riley's panel. But we can make a request to Councillor Riley's panel to review that element of the risk register. It's us who does the overarching review. So we can make a request to his panel to look at those issues.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
There's lots of hands going up. Councillor Shea, then Councillor Frasdale, and then it'll be Councillor Kelly. But Councillor Wheeler will have a second bite of the cherry because he did tell me he had a couple. So,
if I could just respond to that one, Councillor, we are aware of that. Legislation hasn't yet been formed sufficiently to give us enough detail there, but we're well aware that it is coming, and there are moves to address it better when we have more detail.
thank you. But we can flag that for the appropriate panel's work programme for the future if it's not already there. I haven't got their work programme in front of me. You said you had a second one, George. I'll give that one to you before I go around the list.
Thank you very much, Chair. The other one was 21, viability of commercial bus operators. The disaster that is the bus services is showing through now. We've had two fare increases from City Bus within a year, and that's with reduced services, reduced frequencies, some services being removed. It's not City Bus's fault any more than it's Stagecoach's fault where they're doing it. Bus companies used to get fuel duty rebate. That was taken away and replaced by a grant, and now that's gone. I don't think this one comes within our purview.
That's another one for Councillor Riley's panel. We're going to send him a long list at this rate, I think.
I think this is going to be a disaster for the poorest people are people who can't afford cars, and they won't be able to afford buses soon either. So
and increasingly planning permissions are being granted on the assumption that buses will be available, so there's no car parking with them either. So especially in my ward. So I don't want hundreds and hundreds of disenfranchised people who can't get a job because they can't get there. Councillor Kelly, then Councillor Lowry.
Councillor Wheeler, just on his second bite, had the one that I was looking at, which is the buses. But whether we put it onto Councillor Riley's work load or not, we are very dependent upon this BSIP and getting the money. We didn't get it last time. I appreciate we don't control the bus service, but it is very, very emotive with regards to the practicalities of people carrying out their day-to-day lives. However, where I'm coming, on a wider issue, it's not just about the funding and the bus service and the practicalities, it's also the whole underlying ethos of us as a green council, which is trying to move to more sustainable and public transport, and whether that could be more of a focal point than we need more money to keep the bus services going. We do need to look at the knock-on effects. So I don't know which scrutiny committee that would necessarily come under, but it might. Yeah.
Transport all of it sits under his. But I think if we talk about...
But that's the angle as well that needs to be considered.
Yeah. So if we raise the issue of not only item 21 on the risk register, but of a sustainable mass transit system, because that's where we're coming to realistically, whether that's walking, cycling, buses or other things, that needs to be looked at in the round. And if we don't have a policy yet, sometimes us backbenchers on scrutiny panels can help cabinet members develop them, not just read them before they're pushed through the sausage machine. So we'll add that one to our request. Sorry, I actually had Councillor Bryardell before I had Councillor Lowry, so...
I was going to actually echo the point that Councillor Share raised before he said it. So in terms of food waste recycling that Councillor Wheeler mentioned, it's something that we've discussed recently as part of the Net Zero Action Plan discussions, and I certainly share his concerns around the slowness with which national government have approached this particular topic. I'd suggest speaking to your colleague who's been involved in that process, and there'll be an opportunity in full council in March and in the Grove Scrutiny to look in more detail at the Net Zero Action Plan comments regarding food waste recycling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry.
As always, Chair, we are learning, and in audit and governance, the reason we decided to share this risk register was to do exactly what's happening today, which is to members to see it and thereby consider what their work programme might look like going forward. I would just remind everybody that this is not just shared with our panel, it's shared with every panel. So therefore, they should be doing exactly what you're doing today, which is recommending that X, Y, and Z look at it, and I hope they're doing exactly that. But yet we should, nevertheless, in this committee meeting, in my view, be focusing on what we wish to achieve and assume that they're doing their job in their own committees, Chair.
Whilst we make that assumption, because we have performance and finance, we tend to, as we have with the performance report and with finance reports of previous meetings, we will pick things up and refer them across, but we will make sure, because I think our committee is the one that's used to reading the papers in detail, rather than just assuming they're... not necessarily the committee chairs, but some of the members on some of the other committees don't necessarily think that this is ours. I'm happy to say so, because I've been told so by committee members on the others, that they assume we do it and we just flag things for them. So it is part of the issue that has been raised and is being considered as part of the scrutiny review at the moment, about how we join some of these things up and do things in different ways. There are, but certainly I think we're the only committee that reads the entirety of all of the packs, because I think a lot of committees read the bits that are just obviously theirs, and we pick up some of the cross-cutting themes and do reminders. Any more on the risk? No? Brilliant. We have been emptying work programmes, but we're busy repopulating them for whoever does this next year. So moving on, we had a supplement pack, and this item on cyber security actually arose out of a discussion we had here from the risk register a few times ago, and Councillor Partridge asked us to put it on the work programme, and here it is. So we have Councillor Shea, supported by John Finch and Pete Honeywell. Can we ask for a very brief introduction to the paper? I'm then going to ask if Councillor Partridge, you might want to make a first response and raise any issues you see before we open up to discussion, as it was you who specifically asked us to look at this. So over to you, Councillor Shea.
Thank you very much, Chair. The threat from cyber attacks is rising within the public sector, with several councils suffering major attacks in the last 3 years, which has resulted in the total loss of IT services. This has resulted in a major focus within central government and the Local Government Association to ensure that local authorities reduce their exposure to cyber attack, and also have the appropriate business continuity process in place to reduce the impact of the affected by the cyber attack. This report sets out the different scenarios that the council may face. With each scenario assessed for the impact on the council, the report then covers the action the council has taken to reduce the impact of the attack. And having some experience of this in the commercial world, and with significant levels of additional security, I can say that this draws a number of significant parallels to what's carried out in the commercial world, especially where information is that much more sensitive. It's a very, very good paper. I have no doubt it will evolve over time as the different methods of cyber attacks evolve and the sophistication of them evolve, but I think it's a very, very good first paper.
Thank you, and you're right, this is a first paper, and it's the start of a process. Up there on the telly screen, have either of you got anything you wish to say before I hand over to Councillor Partridge?
I don't think so, Chair. I think we're very happy to take questions. I think it'd be interesting to learn what the angle the committee is interested in us pursuing to greater levels of detail once we hear the questions.
Great.
And one thing I'd like to add, the paper mentions the Cyber 360, which will take place next month. That will formulate future versions of this paper with the recommendations from that.
Brilliant, thank you. It's great to have Scrutiny involved at early stages. The more of this we can get, the better, I think, for the Council. Councillor Partridge, I'll hand over to you for a while.
Thank you, Chair. Question to, who do I want to direct this to?
Whether you have any reflections before you get on to a question.
Reflections?
Because
so
because this was an area you have interest in and you raised.
My reflections, it's good that you've got an awareness, and Councillor Shea, you are quite right in what you said. Many councils across the country have suffered cybersecurity attacks. I was speaking with a colleague from Cornwall Council yesterday, and indeed his own email, while he had his phone in his hand, had been hacked by someone, and they got into Cornwall Council's system. Only for a minute, but it shows that the risk is there. I'm pleased to hear that you have an awareness of it, and that it's on your radar. I've got questions alluding to that, but we'll come to that later. Thank you.
Feel free to go on with your first question before we go anywhere else.
So in terms of physical and software security, would I be right in assuming we are using open source architecture, or are we using something that's just software based, that is often in the public domain, but not necessarily consumer grade? I'm talking about enterprise grade.
Thanks, Pete. You've got an expert up there.
Yeah,
Mark.
I'm not hedging my bets here. I will pass you over to Pete here. However, please be aware that there are certain questions that we would be willing to answer, and some questions we wouldn't necessarily be willing to answer, because it leaves us open to our methodology of protecting the systems here. So please, we are public at present, we're not in part two, so please be cautious with your questions. But Pete, if I hand over to yourself.
Sure, Councillor, thank you. So our defences are, first of all, to make them very clear, we are not using consumer-grade software for our defences. They are enterprise-grade applications all round, and they are many layers of those defences, including monitoring software, as well as actually then active detecting software, looking at activity in and out of our estate, our IT estate, trying to identify threats and attacks before they penetrate as far as, say, the device or the services that they might want to get hold of. So, you know, my answer is very definitely enterprise-grade solutions, and an array of enterprise-grade solutions covering both monitoring and then detection and protection activity.
Thank you. Just in terms of what Councillor Shea has said there, we're not going to go into part two today. If we identify things that we want to do further research on that might need a part two meeting, we will do that separately, and we will put that on the work programme for the next municipal year. We are, once again, talking about one of those bits where we want to be as open as we can for the confidence of the people of Plymouth, but we don't want to expose ourselves to risk in going public. So please bear with officers if they say, that's really good, can we pick that up again? I will allow them to do that on this circumstance because I certainly don't want the council to come under cyber attack because of something we discuss here. Did you have a supplemental there, Philip, before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. It's not necessarily a supplemental, but take your words, what you just said. Can we pick that up again when we can speak in a bit more closeness? I don't want this council to suffer some of the losses that other national institutions and businesses have suffered. So it's high on my agenda, but thank you for bringing it up. Thank you to the officers and Councillor Shea.
Thank you. I have Councillor Finn, Councillor Lang and Councillor Kelly.
You don't have to answer any of this if you don't want to. Regard to costs, are we using, there's basically two parts to the question. Are we using bespoke or off-the-shelf software? And with regard to operational systems, if we take PDCs and BDCs, primary domain controllers and backup domain controller systems that were provided for physical architecture, is there more a move within the council now to more cloud-based architecture? And is there a cost saving implied as a result of that? I direct the Chair.
I'm watching everyone looking at each other. It's a bit harder to do on screen. Mark and Pete, by the looks of it.
Chair, for yourself, I'll pan this one over whilst I've got quite a good degree of knowledge here. I'll pass the detail over to Pete on this one.
Sure. So the second part of your question about cloud software, yes, we are increasingly moving services out to the cloud. Not only does that give us additional cybersecurity, but it also, as you've rightly pointed out, offers us an opportunity to buy in a different way, sometimes at cost savings, but almost certainly without the capital investment associated with on-premise type solutions. The first part of your question was about domain controllers, and forgive me, I've forgotten exactly what question you asked me. Could you just repeat the question and I'll try and answer it?
No, it was basically whether we're running from a system of primary domain controllers. Obviously, you had the primary domain controllers, you have your backup domain controllers, you have your mimic software, whether you're still using, say, a PDC concept and sending the rest up to the cloud as for backup purposes, or are you still running a physical architecture on the backup side?
So I mean, our backup architecture is reasonably complicated and hybrid. But I can tell you without revealing too many secrets that we also are using what we call an immutable, i.e. an uneditable backup software. So physical devices that we write to and are then impossible to overwrite, which is a way of avoiding some of the threat that ransomware, for example, presents to us.
Thank you. I'm feeling very lost in this. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I think I might be coming up with a sort of approach come later, but let's see what Councillor Lang and Councillor Kelly add to the conversation.
No, mine's not going to be very technical, don't worry. It talks about in scenario 2, key applications such as Care First. We're not actually using Care First anymore. We're using Eclipse. And my question was about Eclipse. And the records that we have on there, that to me there seems to be two things. There's compromising the service, as in users can't access it, but also, which I didn't see much reference to in here, so maybe you can assure me it doesn't need to be there, but just something about sharing those records, sharing very confidential bits of information about the thing I'm concerned about, children and families, that the council works with. Just how that is mitigated against in this kind of scenario gameplay here. Thank you.
Go straight to John.
Probably, Chair. This is a more of an information governance question than information security side of it. So, John, this one does fall to yourself, I'm afraid. Sorry,
may I just clarify what I'm saying, Chair? What I am talking about in terms of a cyber attack, that there is the scenario where the people that use it can't access it, but also the scenario where the agent of chaos shares that information as part of that cyber attack. So that's what I'm asking about. Thank you.
I'm not techie, but I get that. Other people are looking puzzled. So if under an attack, if it was credit card details, they get shared, what happens if it's vulnerable children, young people and adults? Records are shared, and it's actually their vulnerabilities that are revealed. It's a duty of care issue, I think, that Councillor Lang is raising, and as slightly different than a financial risk. I don't know whether that's been thought about, but I think that's what you're getting at. Does that make more sense to those of you who were... Yeah, I've got a nod from John, so let's go to John and see where that gets us.
Okay, so if I answer the first part of the question first, we are still using Care First for adults and some of children's. Some of the functionality in children's hasn't yet migrated to Eclipse, so that program is continuing for the rest of this year. With regard to some of the ransomware attacks that the attackers have extracted data. It's hard to say what data they have extracted, but we will have processes in place to assess the impact, assess what data has been extracted, if any, and then we'll work with children's services to and adult social care to minimise the impact on the client. And that's one of the most crucial things about our data breach management process is the impact that information can have on a client. And we'll always try to minimise that impact where we can. And fingers crossed we won't be subject to an attack whilst we've still got on-premise services. But having the children's records in Eclipse reduces that risk quite considerably because that is a cloud-hosted service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I think we're all acutely aware of the budget pressures that we're under, and cyber threats, I guess, are growing exponentially with regards to sort of alien states or foreign states that want to do us harm. In terms of the spend and trying to sort of contain any risk, functionality, reputation, loss of people's data, etc., are we collaborating with other local authorities to try to pool, I suppose, our resources with whoever provides it, rather than everybody working in their own little silo, which is in effect duplicating the same outcome that we want, and ultimately we're all spending more on it than if we perhaps became a bit of a conglomerate together where the needs are very, very similar, I would imagine, from one local authority to another.
Looks like that one's you, John.
So we do pool information. I sit on a regional forum around cybersecurity, which has most local authorities in the southwest, from Gloucestershire, Dorset, all the way down to Cornwall. And that links in with the national meeting we have once a month with the National Cybersecurity Centre, various government departments. So a lot of that intelligence and best practice is shared. And the NCSC have made available quite a few national systems that we don't actually have to buy into because they're free, where they're doing some of the monitoring for us. So we are pooling things in those respects. With regards to technical solutions, each environment is completely different, so it is a lot trickier to do that. But we do prefer to learn from other people's, say, mistakes, what's happened, and some of the local authorities who have been attacked in the last couple of years have shared some very valuable information with us around what we can do to mitigate. And we've bought into programs such as the Cyber 360 program, which is, I've mentioned before, that will actually help us improve. And that is also based on nationally known information. So we collaborate as much as we can on an intelligence sharing aspect. And funding-wise, we have investigated where we can get funding in some cases. And I don't know if Pete wants to elaborate a bit more on that, but for example, one of the things we will get out of the Cyber 360 program is a free consultation on business continuity. So the Business Continuity College or Emergency Planning College will be offering the assistance to facilitate that for us, which normally would cost tens of thousands of pounds for them to conduct those sort of programs. So we are getting some of this because of our volunteering to help with national programs. I don't know if you want to elaborate any more on any of that.
You're on mute, Pete.
Schoolboy error, sorry. Yeah, just to underline what John's saying, the intelligence pooling is a strong aspect of what we do. We have been lucky enough to benefit from support from what was the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, now DLUC, who supported us with access to agencies a couple of years ago to do assessments of our cyber defences then, and then make recommendations about how to improve those cyber defences, which we've completed those actions. And we continue to take advantage of all of the third-party expertise that DLUC and other government agencies put our way, as John has said.
Thank you. Councillor Finn, then Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I just want to take on, I think, Chair, I think this is directed towards John. Data separation, I think Councillor Lang brought it up just now, but children's services, obviously finance would be separate as personal data of others. To mitigate the risk, do we have robust separation of data streams? So in the event of a cyber event, not all systems go down at the same point and will leave areas operational?
Yes, Councillor. So we definitely have separation in cloud-hosted services. So Microsoft 365 is all hosted in Microsoft Data Center. Eclipse, so the children's social care data, that will be hosted in a different data center. And we are trying to implement as much data separation as we can on most of our on-premise systems, which we are reducing, are hosted in well, at the moment they're hosted in Windsor House, but they're going to be moved to a more secure data center that's hosted by the same sort of company that Microsoft use. So it's hyper resilient and got a lot of security features that we couldn't even consider implementing ourselves. But we do have any cloud hosted system generally is completely segregated from any on-prem systems.
The last hand I have is Councillor Lang's.
Yeah, as I said before, I'm not remotely technical in this area at all. I just wondered if this is all very high-level stuff, or if there's anything that we as councillors can do to protect us or the council. Or is this something that wouldn't happen at our kind of the level of IT that we use individually?
Over to you, Pete.
Well, Councillor, I couldn't have asked for a better question to take from the committee, actually. So there's what we would love to invite you to do is to join essentially the human firewall protecting the council. And to do that, what I anticipate the best thing possible to do is to actually share with you the list of kind of hints, tricks and tips that we've offered to staff, and encourage you to follow a few good practices which will make all the difference really in terms of our ability to ward off the most obvious and direct forms of cyber attack. So I'm very hopeful that we'll get a recommendation out of Cyber 360 to do something along the lines of raising awareness amongst members again, to bring them all up to speed with what they can do to protect themselves and the council's data and systems assets. And if we can encourage councillors to just spend 5 minutes even paying attention to the what is essentially rather humdrum stuff, but makes a huge difference in terms of their awareness to deal with the most likely form of attack, which is actually an email purporting to come from a reputable source, but actually containing something damaging that once loaded onto our system will go find itself as much data and access to systems as it possibly can. If we can encourage councillors to pay attention to that and to then not fall foul of those kinds of emails, that would be fantastic. John's got his hand up, so he probably wants to say something as well.
And I'd also like to encourage councillors to share that with people in their ward and the businesses they deal with, because we're all working for the people of Plymouth at the end of the day, and as much intelligence and tips we can share helps us as a city.
Thank you. I think I know a bit more now than I did 20 minutes, half an hour ago, which is good. Can I suggest that we make some recommendations? And I know we've not talked about recommendations, but I just tried to pull some bits out. The first is that hints and tips thing is circulated to all members. We get the members briefing, but with an explicit, please share this, please use this and please share this, so that we can all be seen to be part of that firewall you talked about, Pete. We're about to hit a period where there will be a whole load of inductions happening for new members. Can I suggest that as part of the induction programme, there is a specific short session on cyber security, so that new members are aware of how to be secure both on council equipment and on bring your own device. I say that because I don't have any council equipment and I entirely use my own equipment, so we need to cover both. But if that session is timed and known in advance, that other members who might not be new could also just be informed about it if they wanted to drop in. I think those are things that we can practically do. The third thing I was going to suggest would be for the new municipal year, but that we ask for not a formal meeting, but for a part 2 briefing meeting of the responsible panel with officers that can actually do a bit of education about the tech stuff, as well as talking through some of the tech things. If you're techie and you're in that session, I would ask that you try and remember all the rest of us who aren't and are having to play catch up with your questions while you're asking with them, but so that there's a broader understanding and a growth of technical knowledge through that. And that might be something that needs to be continued during the year before stuff can come back into a more public scrutiny session, because then it would be scrutinising from an understanding rather than this item identified on the risk register where we're all working a bit in the dark and are totally dependent on the experts that the council employs, and that's sort of right, but we still need to be able to hold the council to account and make suggestions. Those are the 3 bits I pulled out of that discussion. I know there's lots of other bits that might come out of the briefing around costs or methodology or data security and different systems and how they all work, but I thought that was 3 covered. Does that sound reasonable to everyone in the room? Are we happy to put those forward as recommendations? Seeing lots of nods. Thank you everyone for that. I think we've probably started a discussion rather than completed a discussion, but a very important one for us to be having. Moving on. It's the home straight. It's my final sheet of briefing note. But having said that, a couple of really important items are about to happen, and I'm sort of wondering, because everyone should already be here and I can't see anyone in the room. Do the people for the next session know we're here, not downstairs? Okay, so Councillor Smith is running late, stuck in traffic, and we don't yet have Laura or Caroline, and the Safer Plymouth people wouldn't be here yet. So I am going to beg an indulgent to use a bit of time and start at the bottom and work my way back up. So tracking decisions on page 231 to 238. We have had lots of responses. Things have turned grey, and even the white one mostly has been done. Can we pass our thanks on to officers for doing that? We spent most of this year chasing old responses, and things have improved. So I think that's positive news. The one thing I haven't done that I said I would do was to write to all staff, because you can see from our Director of HR's response, she's suggesting I shouldn't be writing to all staff to thank them for completing the survey. And I just wanted to get confirmation from you that you did want me to do that before I made pushback. I think that we said we would do it. We said it in front of staff representatives, and we should, but I'm now going to have a senior level fight, and I want the committee's backing before I have it. So if you're happy for me to do that, I will press that.
Can I just ask, what reasons were they against that happening?
On the basis that the Chief Executive had already put it in staff news of her thanks, and we wanted to express member thanks. So if people are happy with that, I'm seeing nods.
I'm not sure where we are from a constitutional sort of legal perspective. I mean, the Chief Executive is the head of paid services, and communications with staff are normally carried out in that manner. And there are lots of occasions when we as individuals wish to thank staff, and we normally get the opportunity to do that in a public meeting like this, or of course in the council chamber where the Lord Mayor themselves do those things on our behalf.
The objection hasn't been legal. It was the Chief Exec's done it so you don't need to. Whereas what we said was, having heard from staff representatives, that we wanted staff to know that their voices were listened to by us, and we wanted to say thank you for your opinion, and say please make sure you fill it in next year, and encourage your colleagues to do it as well, because, and I could say these are the sorts of things that the committee has put on its work programme because of your report, so that it was another thing of making staff feel engaged and listened to and supporting the process. If people are happy, I am more than happy to write that letter, but I just wanted to do a double check before I did. So that was tracking decisions. We now have Laura online, and we have Councillor Smith. So, Councillor Smith, do you want to? If you head down to... So, you know, we moved because of an earlier agenda item where we expected, we had members of the public in attendance, and so Warspite wouldn't have been big enough. Welcome. This is a piece of pre-decision scrutiny. The council has a public sector equalities duty, and we take that very seriously, and as part of that now produce an annual action plan of activity. The working group has looked at it, and with total acceptance of everyone involved, it was felt that it, as well as the working group, which is obviously a working group, so not in public, that we did need to make sure it was scrutinised before Councillor Smith took it to Cabinet for approval. And so we're here. Councillor Smith, I'll hand over to you to introduce, and I spot you have both Kim and Laura here with you on screen.
Yeah, great, thank you, Chair. So thank you for your time this afternoon. Sorry I was a little bit late. I got stuck in traffic on the way over here, so I've at least had a couple of minutes to gather myself. So as Chris has just said, as a council, we are committed to meeting our public sector equality duty and are working hard to promote equality, celebrate diversity and support community cohesion. We're also committed to ensuring that we treat our customers and employees with respect and dignity and understand the barriers that different communities in our city face. Our ambition is to create a city where an outstanding quality of life is enjoyed by everyone is central to the council's vision. And the Council's values of being democratic, responsible, fair and collaborative are particularly relevant to equality and diversity and to the, in inverted commas, our commitment to equality and diversity paper, which we are discussing today and which is in your packs. Our commitment to equality and diversity paper demonstrates the progress that the Council has made in meeting its PSED, so its public sector equality duty, and sets out how we have been promoting equality during the past year. Some of the work we have delivered includes involving members in our equality and diversity work through a cross-party equalities working group, which has already been alluded to and which I chair and which meets about 4 times a year to look at these issues. Delivering the city survey and using the insights to inform the development of the Community Builders programme, which provides additional engagement capacity in some of our most deprived wards. Working in partnership with local organisations to improve the accessibility of our events, supporting our employee networks, supporting employees to effectively consider equality and diversity during procurement activities and decision making. I think it's also worth saying quite a lot of the events that get put on in the city as well have a kind of direct relationship to the equality and diversity work that we do. Most notably would have been Holocaust Memorial Day, which took place at the end of January and which would be organised by Laura, who's the officer that heads all of this up. So that's sort of another aspect of what we do. It is important that we continue to take specific steps to ensure that the Council continues to meet and exceed its public sector equality duty, and that's why I'm pleased that we have developed a new Equality and Diversity Action Plan for 23-24, which was developed in consultation with the Corporate Equality Group and the Equalities Working Group, so both staff and members. And it's worth just saying that that's not the first one of those plans, it's an ongoing plan, and that's, I think, the second iteration of it. So at least within the Equalities Working Group anyway, I think it might have existed before, but I'm new to this piece of work. But I just want to, it makes it sound like that's a brand new piece of work. It's not. That's something that's been ongoing over a number of years and is, you know, kind of flexes and changes as required. However, the 23-24 action plan aims to build upon that good work which has already taken place, and the completion of actions on the action plan allows the Council to continue its journey toward excellence on the equality framework for local government, which is something I'm sure we all want to achieve as soon as we can. So I look forward to listening to the contributions from the committee, and as we've said, the Equalities Working Group who've put this together in the first place, I'm open to suggestions for how we can add value to the action plan. So you have got both a copy of the our commitment to equality and diversity paper, and then also the latest version of that new updated action plan, and that's pretty much most of our action plans with measures and timescales, etc. So back to you. Thank you, Chair. Oh, and can I just say, actually, I have no idea if this is appropriate, but I would just like to say well done to Laura Hill and to Caroline Marr and to Kim, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes on all of this work and provide an enormous amount of staff leadership, which then it makes it very easy to join in with as an elected member with our team as well. So it's just worth putting on record. Thanks for all of their hard work.
Thank you, that's totally appropriate. I don't know whether Kim or Laura wish to make any comment at this stage or just be there to answer questions if necessary. I'm not seeing them come on screen, so we'll move to, are there any questions? Any questions or comments on the plan? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to have this committee, and I was pleased to set it up. Could I just clarify, I don't know whether it might be through Kim, but could she confirm that all 57 councillors have actually undertaken the equality and diversity training to show that we are leading by example rather than possibly just paying lip service to this?
Chair, is it okay if I respond?
Yes, please do.
Councillor Kelly, I haven't got the figures at my fingertips at the moment. The majority of the councils have done it, but I know that not 100% have. So I can provide you with that update pretty soon after this meeting, if that's okay. And yes, so not all have completed, but a large majority have.
Kim, would it be right to say that because it's an LGA training course, you only get told that people have completed it when they send you their completion certificate, and that you don't get sent the information directly.
That's correct, Councillor Penberthy. That's correct.
So when you send the information, because it's a response, it'll go in our tracking and be sent out to councillors. Could you remind people who've completed it and not sent you their certificate to do so? Because otherwise we can't actually demonstrate that we are leading by example. That would be a timely reminder. Thank you.
I'll do that as an action.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I don't know if this is appropriate, but when we have our new intake of councillors in May, there is always a programme of, training that they need to do. Could it not be put on that programme right at the beginning of induction? If it's already on there, then can we then push that they, a bit like corporate parenting, really just keep hammering that every member does it, basically?
I think you're right, and from conversations we've had at the Equalities Working Group, there is a sense that the LGA training is very basic and that actually we want to develop an enhanced version of it for all members here in the city, because we need to move beyond just what they're saying and do more. So I think that's, from memory, I'm right there, aren't I, Councillor Smith?
It's not so much that it's basic, it's more that we didn't like the format of it. So I think it could just be worth exploring what we offer, because it was more that there were some elements of it that I personally found frustrating, which I think you might have agreed with, and I think Kim could see what we were talking about. So that you decide what you want to do, but I wouldn't say I think it is not enough. I think the content is adequate. It's very similar to what I've done in my day job, but the way they present it, I personally found quite patronising.
Maybe just describe it as introductory level rather than at any other level, and we want councillors to be more than just introduced to topics, as well as format, that I think there is more we can do. Councillor Hayden.
Yeah, because I think from where I'm coming from, it also shows elected members of how to behave in the community and how to engage with people. It's really important. Thank you.
Totally. Councillor Lowry.
I mean, 57 members are a small number of people in relation to this overall plan and what it's trying to achieve, but like it or not, us 57 are often the front-facing for the council, and sadly often we do make mistakes, and I'm sort of picking up on the comments made by all councillors here. I think there is a requirement. I remember doing the training myself some years ago, but things do move on, language does move on, and I know it's difficult to get members to engage all the time in training. I'm guilty myself on occasions, but this is really a very important thing, and we do need to make sure we're all doing our very best to understand our role in diversity and equality, because we make mistakes, and if we could stop ourselves making that mistakes, it would be so much more beneficial for the council, regardless of us as individuals.
Thank you. And isn't it good that we're talking about our roles and responsibilities here before we even get into the detail of anything else? Thank you.
Just to clarify, the training is great in as much as it's really important to do it. It was just that there were elements of it that I personally found a bit awkward in the sense of how they presented it. Not the material, it was more the way it was presented. So I wouldn't want you to think that I don't think it's important that we do the training as elected members. We've just had a lengthy conversation about the content of the specific course. So.
Yeah, I think, and it is also that things do change, and even courses change, and certainly language and understanding of language within the equalities and diversity agenda is changing, and in fact, generally things are now beginning to move to equality, diversity and inclusion, and there's more stuff being added in, and it's actually quite exciting, but we need to be on board and understanding it, not only technically, but because it's what our constituents are all living day by day, because this is part of everyone's life. Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Chair. Just to Councillor Smith, I know years ago we used to have a industrial diseases register and a disability register under the 1971 Act. We used to have a department that used to deal with the little yellow cards for people with prescribed disabilities. Have we still got that department? And if so, how's that information being used to the greater good for the disabled community in Plymouth?
So just to clarify, you mean for residents, not for staff?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know. Kim, I don't know whether you are aware of what we would have on that and what our expectations would be around identifying people in the community who might need our support. I'm assuming we have other ways of doing that today that are probably more modern than a yellow card, but I'm not quite sure what that would look like. So do you have any insight into that?
So if this is about the community or our customers or residents, so when our customers access our services, we're able to collect data for them and provide the appropriate support. If you're asking about is there a disability, when I say commission, a network that customers or residents can be signposted to, I'd have to go away and think about that. But from a customer perspective, when they're receiving services from us, we collect data so that we can make sure that the information is relevant and that they're given the appropriate support in whatever they, whether it's at our front desks, if it's with our young people, children, etc. So we do collect data, counsellors, on based on the the protected characteristics and making sure that we're able to deliver services appropriately. But as I said, if it's about a particular advice line that we've got available, I'm not aware that we've got one in the council that's available to our customers that may have a disability, etc. So it's not just one strand, it's about actually how we can provide our services in an inclusive way, if that answers your question.
No, Kim, I think we slightly missed it there. It was about the council used to hold a register of disabled people under the prescribed industrial diseases. I've got the actual card myself at home. Used to have a register of all the disabled residents in Plymouth. It used to be used for information purposes and dissemination of information to various organisations as well. I didn't know whether that was the actual scheme. We used to hold it as a council. Does it exist or not anymore?
Sounds like you're saying that in relation to a specific piece of legislation. I think we need to look in.
Yes, so we'll have to look into that, because I'm not clear that I'm not sure that we've got that, but I can go and do some research if that's okay.
I think what I would just say is, with any of this work, it's at the a lot of it in the kind of 21st century terms is up for people to self-identify in that way so that we can help them. So I'm not sure. Kim will potentially find something different, but I'm not sure that sort of thing exists in that way. But we do have that data, and for example, if we're doing housing applications and things like that, obviously people's disability would be a key aspect of that application, and then we'd be able to support them accordingly.
What I'll do, Councillor Smith, then, is find the actual card, the registration that was registered with Plymouth City Council, just to see if it's just to see if it still exists, or whether we can still recommend our constituents to it as a means of disseminate information to disabled communities. Thank you.
My guess is that because everyone is a bit unsure that it's not there, but you talked about the 1970s, and there's been a substantial amount of legislation in this field since then that has swept up and changed the way previous provisions were done. So I think that it could have been that's been swept up into different ways of working. I can't remember any of my disabled residents talking to me about one of those when they're talking about other things. So, and as my parents had, my mother's registered disabled recently and hasn't been given one, I'm not sure that it's still relevant. But Councillor Lally, was that your hand going up just now?
Yes, mine is in relation to the context on page 108, and it says the Equality Act extends statutory protection against 9 protected characteristics, and that there is introduced a public sector equality duty, which is great. I just want to know, does that in any way extend to us commissioning services or contracts in any way? 'Cause I look at the plan, it doesn't seem to make any reference. It says partners, but for instance, if we commission someone to rebuild the council house, for instance, do we demand within our commercial arrangements that you do X, Y, and Z? Because I don't see any reference to it in the report. And it may be covered elsewhere. I'm just sort of double checking, really.
I mean, in point 1, point 2, and 1.3 obviously talks about those duties in a bit more detail, and we obviously look at it in the equality and impact statements within decisions that are made. In terms of the corporate side, that's outside of my knowledge, I'm afraid. So I think that would be the sort of thing for us to get an answer back to you on. But I don't see why. Yeah, I think let's double check. But I know that this is partly why we have the Equalities Impact Statement, is entirely because of this public sector equality duty. Whether that extends to how we buy services, I know we've looked at it for kind of climate emergency. I'm not sure whether we have done from that and what we would be judging people on and whether we've got the power to do that. But I think we can report back on that.
From memory, Councillor Larry, when I was the Cabinet member with responsibility for procurement, this was all swept into the social value elements of procurement, so that because we can't require specifics, but we can ask people to address, and it's all within the matrices there. So it's probably worth checking through the procurement
That
team.
sounds familiar to me as well, so yeah, that'd be great.
So I think we've done it, but there we go. I'm not spotting any other hands. One of the bits I wanted to raise, and this is just, it will be in your packs, you've only got the one paper. Earlier on, we looked at the very latest performance report, which hasn't yet been to Cabinet. And in it, there's one of the headline questions on performance is the percentage of city respondents who think their local area is a place where people from different backgrounds get on well together. In 2021, that was 55% of the population. In 2022, it was 42%. It's being suggested in the narrative that that's purely because of COVID neighbourliness, but that seems to me not to be addressing the issue of a 13% drop in understanding of why people from different backgrounds get on well together. Now, I know that has come out since this has been done, but I think a request that the impact of that figure is looked at a bit more seriously. I'm not sure that we can just say community builders will fix that, nor can we say, oh, that's COVID neighbourliness going back to normal. And whilst it's better than 2020, it's just a very big drop. And I think there are probably some community cohesion issues in terms of current environments that might be impacting that.
Is there a third option there? Is that a yes, no, or a don't know? Or is that a straight yes, no answer? Do we know that?
I'm only going on the headline of...
It would be actually very interesting to see if we can break that down to ward limit, wouldn't it? Because I'm imagining for some wards they might not have that. Yeah, okay, we can definitely look at that, put that on an agenda.
Caroline's not here, but Laura works with Caroline on this. I just think that might be something to bring into the working group, because both by ward and to understand a bit better the answers to that question might inform future work. Laura, did you want to say anything on that?
No, that's certainly possible to bring back Councillor Penberthy. And just to add that we do have the breakdown by demographic and also at ward level, so we can provide that as well where there's a statistical difference.
Thanks. I think it might be useful for us to know, and then if there are outlier wards or specific issues, to start working with ward councillors, if necessary community builders and others, on how we address those in a very sort of targeted way, so that we're good for the city. That's one of the advantages of this committee, is reading across reports sometimes. The other one I just wanted to mention, which is slightly presentational, in the report it talks about us continuing the marking of Holocaust Memorial Day. So I'm just trying to find it myself. I put a circle around it, but I can't find the circle. Page 10 of 18 on yours, page 116 of everyone else's. Civic leaders demonstrating commitment. We actually haven't talked in there at all about the training element that we talked about earlier. But the measure of success being we continue to mark as a civic event is actually would require a decision of council not to do, because it was council that determined that Holocaust Memorial Day is a civic event. And I think just slightly rewording that to say council has determined that Holocaust Memorial Day will be celebrated annually as a civic event actually shows more leadership than us just continuing to do something. So I just wondered whether, in terms of the measure of success, it doesn't change what we do, but it talks about leadership in a much more assertive way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us doing that.
I think it's probably worth Laura looking at that, because actually I think it's because it's responding to the action. So it actually could be we just take it out and think, is there another measure we can add in instead? Because I think that predates my knowledge as a councillor. So but I think because of what the action is, to change it in the way you've said, it wouldn't quite answer the action. So it could just be we look at that whole one and we'll bring it back before we finalise it. So.
But I just think there's something there about what we as council, as we've talked earlier about the role of council in making decisions. This was one of the ones we could make and not just recommend. So, so there was that little bit. Anything else on our commitment to equality and diversity there? No. A big thank you to the team for coming in and doing that, for giving us a chance to have a look. I think it's interesting, isn't it, that most of the thing has been about what we do. I think we've made some suggestions that people have commented on as we've gone along, and they'll come through in our minutes. But thank you to Kim and Laura for noting and agreeing those as we go, and to you as well, Councillor Smith. Any more on that item? No? Thank you very much, and thank you to Kim and Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just waiting, we're waiting for the next team to arrive to do the Safer Plymouth update. So we'll just see if they're outside. Thank you, and welcome to the team. Segueing in actually very nicely from the last item on the current municipal year's Equalities and Diversity Action Plan, was that we would undertake some scrutiny looking into hate crime and the outcomes of hate crime in the city in order that we could better understand that. And we mulled a number of ways of doing this. And we decided not to do a task and finish group, but we also have another thing that we do as a scrutiny panel. It is our responsibility to scrutinise the working of the Community Safety Partnership. And the Community Safety Partnership lead on this in the city as a multi-agency approach. So today I'd like to welcome not only Councillor Patel, who is the Cabinet member with responsibility for community safety, but Inspector Matt Longman, who chairs the Community Safety Partnership, Matt Garrett, Tracy Naismith and Siobhan Logue, who support it. We have in front of us this year not a report on everything that the Community Safety Partnership does, but actually a really in-depth report on hate crime and outcomes, which I think is really useful for us to have as a starting point for discussion. I'm going to ask Matt, I think probably you as chair of the partnership, to take a lead on this, introduce the report and anything else, and then we'll move on to any questions that people have. So if you're happy to take the floor with any comment.
I'm more than happy to. Councillor Patel, did you want to speak first?
I can introduce the report, if you don't mind. Yeah. So let me start by saying that hate crime has no place within our city. Details of the report produced for this panel, you will see the evidence of the great work around the area of hate crime being delivered in partnership across the city and overseen by the Community Safety Partnership, Safer Plymouth. Following the management of risk in law enforcement, workshops in September Safer Plymouth highlighted within the strategic crime assessment the need to continue to understand the impact of hate crime within the city. There has been a drive to report hate crime when they happen, increase community cohesion, and to empower individuals to know that hate crime is completely unacceptable within our city. The drive has been pushed by the Safer Communities Theme Group within Safer Plymouth, where multiple agencies meet bi-monthly to discuss various operational community safety issues, including hate crime. If concerns are identified, this forum is used to assist with creating problem-solving plans, pertinent updates, or emerging issues are then shared with Safer Plymouth Executive Meeting for strategic oversight and collective planning. Safer Plymouth is a trauma-informed community safety partnership and has, at its core, the welfare of residents in mind, working towards preventing adverse childhood experience or re-traumatization. This is especially pertinent in the area of hate crime, which can be hugely traumatic for people. Devon and Cornwall Police have a diverse communities team who are building trust, community cohesion, and working on breaking down barriers to reporting. This team worked closely with the Council and Safer Plymouth in order to provide a joined-up response to hate crime, reinforcing its unacceptability within the city. There is a huge contribution from local organisations and charities to help deliver this work around the city and to support the victims of hate crime in reporting and identifying where hate crime has taken place. These local organisations also bring the voice of lived experiences to Safer Communities Theme Group, so that those who feel unable to can have their story heard. Understanding the impact of hate crime on people is paramount to identifying ways to prevent it. Positive work is going on in the city, and initiatives such as safer delivery schemes, various activities in Hate Crime Awareness Week, and greater third-party reporting network contributing to tackle the area of hate crime, making all communities feel safer. Looking forward, Safer Plymouth have identified room for improvement where more work is looking to be done, and utilise reflective thinking to identify these and find the best solutions. One area highlighted a number of times when looking at hate crime was the area of education. Teaching children from a young age the unacceptability of hate crime is key to preventing it for future generations. The police have been working with a number of schools to provide this input. However, this is an area looking to have further work. Whilst completing a questionnaire as part of the Safer Community Group, another gap has been identified within taxi licensing, which has already, since the report was written, made positive progress, with a new subgroup being created focusing on barriers to reporting in this area. Hate crime is a priority for Safer Plymouth Community Safety Partnership, and will work to continue in this area to ensure Plymouth is a welcoming city for all. Thank you, Chair. That's the...
Thank you. Pat.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, first of all. And thank you for the opportunity, to be honest, to come and discuss such an important topic. I don't think there's a huge amount more to be added than Councillor Patel's taken you through the report. So suffice to say, as the chair, I suppose that's an important distinction that might be obvious to you, but never judge a book by its cover. I need to remove my police hat somewhat today, because I am sat before you as the chair of Safer, although clearly have a particular interest in the policing side of it. So I think from a chair's point of view, just some reassurance that we recognise the importance of this, of it in any city, that getting hate crime right, and it's a complex issue, and putting the right resources and the attention to understanding the problems and then doing something about it has never lost our mind within Safer Plymouth. So welcome the opportunity to take any questions you like on the report we've given you.
Thank you. Tom Drysdale first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Really interesting read. When I was reading the report, and specifically thinking around page 131, the hate crime by neighbourhood table, there are a lot of things in here that on the face of it, look really reassuring. Some positive trends, and a lot of communities not reporting certain types of hate crime. And I was going to make a general point around concerns around underreporting, but also wanted to look specifically at the transgender community. One of the earlier pages, I think it was 128, mentioned as a positive trend, a positive example, that transgender related hate crime in Plymouth has dropped by 50% over the last year. And the table on page 131 implies that in the majority of neighbourhoods in Plymouth, those crimes aren't happening. But I suppose what I wanted to ask, based on the fact that the lived experience of some of my transgender friends, and also Home Office national statistics, which suggest actually on a national level, the group of protected characteristics most at risk of an increase in hate crime is the transgender community, whether the difference between the Safer Plymouth data and those national trends is due to Plymouth really leading the way on this equalities issue, or whether underrepresenting is involved here. And if underrepresenting is involved, what more can the council and Safer Plymouth do to encourage engagement, positive engagement with that community, and encourage more victims of transgender hate crimes to come forward in the future? Thank you.
So it's probably a word I'm going to use a lot throughout the questions. It's complex, isn't it? It's to the reasoning behind people, the reasons people will engage or say with the police, because that's usually the first point of call, although not always, we know through third party. But the reasons that help people to engage, to stay engaged, to report in the first place, there's lots of reasons. I think the other thing that's really is really difficult when you transgender issues is that the number of reporting in any area in the UK is very low, and therefore when you start to map it about where it's gone up or down, you're talking about very small numbers. And so you've just got to take that into account, I think. I think there were a couple of questions within what you're asking. So if I look at one was around, is Plymouth leading the way, or is this in line with a national view? I think that's really hard to know. What we've seen is that reporting is slowly, by very small numbers, going up over a number of years, which I think is a really positive thing. It would suggest to me that people are more likely to engage, and there's a growing confidence, perhaps in the confidence to report, or just a wider response of the city to have the open conversation around transgender issues, and therefore more likely to report as a consequence of that. I suspect a mixture of two. Could I, hand on heart, sit here and now and say those numbers are because Plymouth's paving the way for the UK? I think it would be remiss of me to say that, because we don't know. What I do know is we're putting an awful lot of thought and effort into how do you understand how much of an issue there is, how much of a problem there is, what's the impact on people, and what are the steps you take to get people to report more. So I'd finish that by saying the diverse communities team within the city, we're investing in more and more. They are definitely looking to open up those conversations, and that's linked to the other part of your question, is, well, what can councillors do about this? I think just to keep raising it as a subject, and wherever you can, signposting people, preferably to the police, because we've got more and more expertise there to receive those, even if they're just inquiries, they don't have to be crime complaints, and nor do they have to be from victims. It can be people from witnesses, anybody who's concerned. But of course, if people don't feel comfortable, then we'll keep promoting the third party, which is within the pack. So I think the more we have the conversation, the more we understand what we're dealing with as a whole city.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. I'm not rubbing my hands because I'm asking a question. I'm rubbing it because it's absolutely freezing in here. Can I just take you to page 128 of our pack? And it's about the can't you say it? It's about the schools, the highlight, the crime assessment highlighted that identified the need to support schools. Could you tell me what more you're doing and when this work actually started, please?
Button. So I think, as Councillor Patel said, just a recognition from within the moral assessment that's one of the areas we can do more as a city is around education. I try and speak to schools myself whenever I can. I don't have as much time as I used to at different levels, but the diverse communities team certainly do. And this, again, this is a Safer Plymouth thing, but the diverse community team has particularly carved out more time to get into schools. Because there's a lovely age when young people, really young people, don't even reflect on some of these issues. They don't even acknowledge them, because they just don't judge people by the colour of their skin, their gender, etc. And then we seem to hit this tipping point where suddenly issues start to creep in the city. So that's why it's been highlighted. The more we can do at education, the earlier. So in answer to the work, it's already underway with a programme from the diverse community team, and they can deliver it through a number of ways. So we can work with partners, and we do work within partners within Safer Plymouth to go into schools. We'll continue to do that through as part of the plan on the page, which is also within your pack. But there's other ways we can do it by promoting things, longer term things like the police are using cadets, they're using mini police, so there's a whole load of ages you can get in different ways, as opposed to, I suppose what we're trying to do is step away from this just turning up to give the assembly or the lecture, which I don't think is the best way of doing it, but engaging young people in wider issues, whether it's the police through cadets, or it's the local authority through youth services, and opening up that debate. The zone have been fantastic in that area, opening up the debate, that's happening now. What we've got to be really smart at is tailoring our responses to what those sessions tell us. So it's not just a delivering to young people, but it's also a listening back into Safer. So we're hearing the messages and responding.
Chair, can I just have a bit of a supplementary? Thank you, Matt, for that. And I totally agree. Turning up in assembly, you just put the children to sleep, really. It's a talking shop. I know about the young little police. One of my granddaughters is one, and it comes home and they talk about it, which is what you want.
Yes, it is.
But what really astonishes me is when I hear from certain schools that they don't need to report certain things. So I'll give you an example. I had come to me about a young lad in a secondary school, had a knife, used a knife on a school bike, not on a person, but it was never dealt with. It was dealt with in-house. It was never reported. And it really, I mean, I know we're talking about hate, but the knife does come into the hate at the same time. And, it really does really concern me about schools not working so closely, everyone not working so closely. So that's just my thoughts, really. If maybe something, I know Safer Plymouth do a fantastic job. But maybe it's something, a bit of a workshop or something that maybe you might be able to achieve.
Thank you. And I now have, so this is one of those where I wrote on the front sheet and I need to move the front sheet off the report because I'm busy leafing through it at the same time. Councillor Lang, Councillor Kelly, then Councillor Lugger.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on Councillor Hayden's point in terms of us. You talked, Councillor Patel, about education and being in schools, and that's where it's really important. And I think there is just an issue in terms of us understanding what's happening in schools. I know I'm not talking about the level of hate crime, clearly, because that will, if it's crime, it will be reported to you, hopefully. I'm talking about racial incidents, any incident against somebody with protected characteristic, how schools are collating and reporting those and then sharing. It's the sharing I'm thinking about. How do we as a council understand those things? Are there clusters of things happening in certain schools, in certain areas? I don't think, as a governor, I know I hear it in a governor's meeting, but then what happens to that information from that point onwards? I think it's important for us as a council, for you as police and Safer Plymouth and all the rest of it, to understand the picture in our schools, the number or frequency of those kind of incidents. I'm just not sure that they may be being collated and discussed and reported within schools or possibly within MATs, but what happens to them after that, I think. And it's a very roundabout way of saying that. What happens? How do we know what's going on in our schools?
So I would say there are differences in schools' approach to reporting, both to police and therefore into Safer Plymouth. I don't work in education, but I have been a governor, and I know there are different pressures that might on different schools that might make you to be seen to be bold in tackling it and therefore very open in what you're experiencing. And perhaps there are times when, for whatever reason, schools are less likely to. So I guess there's two parts to your question. So what happens when it comes to the police and to safer? So most certainly where it's openly coming to police, there's an issue, we'll go in and we use a mixture of two things. So one, we'll put the diverse communities team in to work, and it could be a load of structured sessions that we've just talked about, or it might be the starting of a new scheme, things like the cadets, mini police, etc. Obviously, depending on the age of the school or the pupils. And then secondly, I think there's a space for more widely just neighbourhood policing, because, and I'm aware this is very police-centric, having told you I must not be too policey, but it's kind of where it starts. They are some of the best eyes and ears we've got that I can feed back into Safer with. So there's been an investment in neighbourhood policing, and with a very clear steer to get into the schools and start to triangulate some of the things that you said and say, where does this start to feel out of kilter with the formal figures we're given? And then what we kind of sense through meetings like this or neighbourhood policing going in. I think the role that councillors can play in that is, let's start really celebrating the schools who are having a really transparent conversation about this and being really open with the issues they've got, because if one of the key things that stands out for this report to me is that underreporting is still an issue. And that just runs through life and includes the schools. So I think we should be really commending those schools who step up and say, we're really transparent on this. We're going to be completely honest what we're dealing with, and we're going to invite everyone to help it, as opposed to the people who are going, maybe we can keep it all within ourselves. Let's celebrate the successes rather than pick out and I think the rest will follow.
I guess this would be a supplementary. I take your point about celebrating people who are open. I do, but I wonder whether we should investigate whether we can go a step further and actually compel schools to share that information with us, or share it with Safer Plymouth, because we shouldn't be relying on the schools who know that they need to be transparent and open, and it's brilliant that they do that. And in fact, they can be examples of good practice in this investigation into whether there is a way to compel schools to share that information with you, because it goes right back to Councillor Patel's point in his introduction that if we're talking about education, we need to know if this information is being collated, then I just think we need to find some way of compelling schools or MATs, whatever, to share it, especially with Safer Plymouth. Thank you.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think what needs to be recorded, what should be recorded, is actually really clear. So I don't think that's the issue. I guess it's just how you share that information and at what point you do it. So if the challenge is how do we present that data back into here at the next scrutiny or in Safer Plymouth, that's probably relatively easy to fix. If the question is to triangulate, actually, are you recording the things that we know you should be, that's probably a slightly more in-depth piece of work that I'd imagine the Children's Services certainly would want to be involved, and we could involve the executive group of that.
May I say one last thing? I just think the two actually go hand in hand, because I think if you're compelling people to report, then the underreporting will become obvious, and you can then see where you might need to intervene in that area. Thank you.
Before we move on, I just use my role as chair. I've had an email from David Fiduno saying that he is really hearing more and more incidents of hate incidents in schools which are not being picked up by the school in any way that is recordable, because that potentially has an impact on their Ofsteds, because they need to report that to Ofsted. So they are handling things in ways that aren't recorded, which means there's no real interpretation. I've also had contact recently from a member of staff in a school who said they hauled in some parents because of the behaviour of someone, and the parents' behaviour was exactly the same, and the parents told the school where to go. And so we have a big issue, and schools could be a really powerful instrument for change. I don't know how we handle Ofsted, and maybe this is something that we could specifically ask the Children and Young People's and Education panel to look at, because those reports won't come into us as the Education Authority, they won't come to you as the police, they won't go to probation or any other member of the Community Safety Partnership, and we know that hate crimes within schools can be pretty vicious. They can damage people for life, but also they can set patterns for life, and if because of Ofsted we're not getting that information, no matter what any of us do, we're not able to do it. And I know David was really concerned about the young people he's coming in contact with through Hope FC, who are experiencing things. And he asked me, could we get the Lord Mayor to hold a round table and a commission and all sorts of things that aren't in the Lord Mayor's power. But actually, I think we need to do something around that, because I think there is something about how we support and value our children. If Councillor Tippett was here, I know he didn't go to school in Plymouth, but he'll tell you the impact that had on him in his schooling, and the fact that the school quite often didn't take actions, and he couldn't believe the difference when he came and became a councillor and the way the council approached him compared to the way he experienced education. And I think, we're trying to do things right, but we need to take everyone with us. Sorry, just interjecting there as using my chair's privilege. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Can I just make sure I'm understanding the figures here? It's 2.39 is the total per thousand population. So if we sort of said Plymouth was 264-ish thousand, are we looking at around about 600 hate crimes per year? Is that the quantity that we're looking at?
So let me make sure I'm getting my pages.
Yeah, so 2.39 in that red one, yeah. Up above it says crimes per thousand of population.
Yeah.
So times that by the 264-ish, 262, whatever you want to do, we're looking at around about 600.
Councillor Kelly, could you be a bit closer to the microphone just so that people can pick you up online? And Matt as well. You need to be a bit closer for people to be able to pick you up.
So we're looking at a quantity of around 600. Is that understanding correct? That's the first part I want to establish.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. The second part is, are these reports, or are these you've investigated and you've deemed that it is a hate crime?
So, without getting into too much the complexities of crime recording, because it is a very complicated area, this will be where someone's reported a crime, and if somebody is saying that a crime's happened, it will remain a crime, unless we have specific evidence saying that did not happen, in which case we would then no crime it.
Okay, so the next part of the question is, do you know what percentage, and I presume quite a lot of this is now related to perhaps social media rather than, I don't know, physical, verbal attacks?
Honestly, no. I don't have that figure to hand, and I wouldn't want to even second guess it. So social media most definitely plays a part in it. My gut feeling is it would not be that high, because most of this is what officers go out and deal with, but I don't have those figures to hand.
And then the final point is, we've got 600-ish crimes per year in Plymouth, and clearly any crime's avoidable, but this type of crime, I guess, is very much that it's a choice whether somebody wishes to use words or pick on a characteristic. But in terms of the outcome, what actually happens with regards to somebody going in, reporting a hate crime, you investigating it, do we get any figures back as to what happens with more of a deterrent, really, I guess is what I'm trying to establish here.
Yes, so do you mean a breakdown of the outcomes? What are the possible outcomes?
Not so much what the possible outcomes are, Matt, but if I came and reported a hate crime to you, I don't know if that's gone in your stats or not, but it was deemed it wasn't a hate crime, and it was just shut down, end of, nothing happened. If somebody came and said, I'm being, I don't know, bullied or harassed or whatever through my sexual orientation, you I guess have an obligation, this is the police side now, to go and investigate that. What then happens? Because part of what we're listening to today is to try to prevent this in the first place. But if nobody ever really knows what the punishment or the implications are of being convicted of a hate crime, there's less of a deterrent to stop doing it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so in any instance where we've got a victim of a crime, we'd be putting around a victim needs assessment as one, understand what the victim needs by way of support. So that's not just whilst they're going through the trauma of reporting. or if there were a subsequent court case, but actually ongoing as well, what does that victim of crime need? And also within the victim care unit available within Devon and Cornwall, also again that long term. So the view these days is very much further forward looking than when I joined the job, which was a long time ago now, and you're very much dealing with the here and now. So there's a long term looking after a victim, whatever the outcome, whether there's an outcome that goes to court, is successful at court, or indeed if it's an offence that's not going anywhere. And as part of that, the victim should be updated, will be updated as to what's happened and therefore what that outcome is and what we can expect. And I think if we get that right, that's all part of that education piece.
Just to help you potentially, Councillor Kelly, if you want to come back on questions, page 205 to 210 of your pack has detailed information about outcomes and repeat victimisation. So it's there. One of the things when we talked about this was we specifically asked not just to be told what was being reported, but what happened to the reports, because we felt that was potentially one of the things that wasn't being talked about and could discourage people from reporting if they didn't think action would be taken. So you've got more if you want to then have a browse and come back with more questions. But I'll move on to Councillor Lugger.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question's about the way hate crimes are classified and reported in the data you see on page 131. Take, for example, we look at my ward of Widewell. There's one racial, right at the bottom, there's an identical statistic for racial and religious crimes. Now, there's bound to be a degree of overlap between a religious and race-related type crime. Is that one offence that's been duplicated by the nature of the crime? Or I think my question is simply this: would there be duplication? Would there be, if there was an offence which straddled two types of crime, would it be reported twice, or would it be just reported once?
That's a really good question. My understanding is that it will be under a primary one. So it's not that you'd only look within one and we kind of pigeonhole the world, but it'd be filed under a primary offence, so you shouldn't get duplication within the figures.
Thank you. That's great.
And just a quick question on understanding of the figures. My ward is looking pretty bad on this, on the city centre and Stonehouse neighbourhoods. I just wondered, are these recorded as where the crimes occurred or where the victims lived?
Yeah, it's occurred, so you would expect a picture to look like that. I would say later in the pack, so a city centre, you would quite typically, sadly, see those for all the reasons we understand. If you compare it to a number of other city centres around the UK, actually Plymouth looks like a very safe place. So that's not to explain it away in any way. We know we've got some issues to deal with and we know we've got work that still needs to keep going on. But I think Plymouth is a safe place, relatively.
Yes, and at a recent LGA conference, I had a number of people who come to Plymouth who are from the BAME community because they feel able to be safe here. And so they holiday here out with their families, which is really good news. I just thought in terms of the bit, the recording of crime in the city centre, especially in a bit of Stonehouse, will relate to a lot of people who don't necessarily live in the city centre and Stonehouse, but live in other parts of the city. So a low reporting in your patch might not mean that actually you don't have victims in your patch, it just meant they were victimised in mine. And it doesn't mean that the perpetrators live in my patch either. The perpetrators are as equally likely to live in yours. So I think although it's a snapshot, we need to take that with a bit of understanding that, it's not just, it's their ward problems because they're high on the figures. It is actually something we all need to think about. And I think that was one of the bits that understanding helped me to because I thought it was a point I wanted to make, but I needed to understand.
Might I just add to that as well? So I think it would be timely to say within that, of course, the nighttime economy plays a large part of that. It's not the answer to everything. I think sometimes the answer to nighttime economy gets trotted out to an awful lot of things and can be a bit misleading, but it is a significant part of it. And particularly, I've seen some real improvements within the Best Bar None scheme and the door staff, licensees, bar staff really coming on board with this as a subject and reporting to my officers out in the nighttime economy, which will grow those figures, but also gives me some reassurance that we're having that conversation, that we need to have to understand it.
And I think that's one of the reasons we put it on the agenda. Moving on from you, Councillor Lugger, I have Councillor Hayden, then Councillor Lowry.
That's right, I didn't want to jump the queue. So can I look at page 153? On page 153, it's saying problem of drug use is high. As you go further down, whilst this is a number of possession of drugs in the suspects of under 18 has increased. You know, I won't go into too much detail because there is a police report on it, but I know the ward that I represent, we've got 12, 13 and 14-year-olds taking drugs, where we last weekend had somebody who had OD'd. So I would really like to know what we're actually doing to help our under 18s, please, because it really does alarm me.
So just so I'm clear, so the question's around what we're doing to help under 18s in drug use. Sorry, you're taking me slightly off script because I was in hate crime mode, that's fine. So the Police Crime Commissioner's made a really clear importance around the use, tackling the use of drugs. And within that, you'll have seen Op Scorpion in the city. You will hopefully have seen and heard of Op Scorpion, which is has a number of strands to it. It does link into the nighttime economy. This link is going to keep coming up. In fact, I was out with them only a few weeks ago on patrol. Op Scorpion is not aimed at young people, but young people are very much featuring in it. And the reason I'm raising it is, although it's nighttime economy, it's wider than that. I think it's about people being out and about at that kind of time. So it might not be in licensed premises, and then it can incorporate people who are in that more recreational field of using it. The distinction around Scorpion, and therefore some of the commissioned services out of it, and some of the conversations we have in Safer, is looking beyond just the drug supply and also into recreational use. And I paused there with my words. I felt myself doing it because that can be a contentious debate in itself. So some people would argue you don't need to be worrying about the more possession side of it, focus on supply, and part of that's true. But if you want to help young people, you have to look at the whole process. So I think the best response I can give you today is that the discussion within that plan on the page that's been submitted is very much within Safer. All these conversations, much as they are here, they're all linked, aren't they? It's very hard to pick them out. But where you see individual operations, these are moving far more into how do you support, how do you prevent, and yes, how do you catch the people that are actually causing this by way of supply. That's only one strand. So there are a number of services out, and it's going to keep coming back to education. I firmly believe that, because I think a number of the young people I've worked with here and also across the force, actually, some of whom will come from Plymouth, going to events like Boardmasters. What's astonishing at those events and gatherings is the lack of understanding of the risk that they're at. So I think in the education, once again, is going to provide a really important bit of that jigsaw.
Thank you, Matt. Can I ask the Cabinet Member, Councillor Patel, what are you actually doing as the Cabinet Member to actually help engage with this as our local authority, as our representative? What are you actually doing?
Thank you for your question, a very good question as well. So one of the things that we are doing, we're talking to the Council's youth provision team and all that, because it is, like Matt said, about education. And one of the things we want to educate people is, okay, if your mate's taking drugs, yeah, and something goes nastily wrong, don't just leave him there or her there. Actually phone someone and let someone know, and hang around. You're not going to get into trouble, but if you let people know, chances are you'll save their life. So it's about prevention. Also, there used to be funding around. I don't know what's happened to it, and more funding needs to be thrown at this to educate kids about drugs and their effects and everything else. We used to do it in Barnbarton, and we tackled the drug problem quite well when the Home Office used to do the Streets of Action project. Unfortunately, that funding is not around now, but we need to sort of start pushing government now to start doing that type of stuff again. It is all around education. And coming back to that, even in schools, one of the main issues I've come across is that schools are under so much pressure to do non-curriculum things because everyone wants to come into school and do stuff. and headmasters are turning a lot of this stuff away. Maybe we need to put stuff like this onto the curriculum, and so that the schools are then legally bound to start doing this education, because it is quite important. It's, this is life skills. This will affect them going forward. So yeah, there's lots of initiatives. Nothing's come off yet, but we are pushing to make things happen.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just make a very quick comment? Education is really important. It's really hard to educate young people who are not engaged in their needs, not education. That's what I'm trying to say. But the one bit of education I would like to say was really good is 3 lads stayed with this lad who had OD'd. So, you know what I mean, all praise to them lads, were not frightened to hang around. And hopefully they were able to save him, which was really good. But yeah, it's something that really does need to be pushed. And like you say, maybe it's a recommendation we need to look at the end of this chair. Thank you.
I'll add you to the bottom of the list. Councillor Lowry.
Brief, because obviously Sally's on one here. Perversely today, I've got a paid delivery from a resident in my ward, which is incredibly unique. I'm sure most councillors will say that. And perversely, it is very much exactly on this subject matter. So I should read brief paragraphs of it out. I write to you today with regard to 4 years of racial abuse, of racial hatred, of race discrimination and threatening behaviour towards me, which has made me very nervous and unable to sleep. I won't read the rest of it out because she goes out to set out who, what, where, when, and that's obviously not for a public debate at the moment. I have reported these incidents at Plymouth Community Homes, Devon and Cornwall Police, and the Racial Discrimination Council, and I've also sent this letter to Plymouth City Council, including my local councillor, which is myself, of course. So my question is, in respect of this letter, has this person done the right thing, firstly? And secondly, I'd quite like some direction myself on how you would suggest members might deal with something of this nature, please.
Has this person done the right thing? It's obviously difficult to answer if I don't know all the detail, and of course this wouldn't be the environment to do it, but I'm quite happy to have a conversation after you if I can help make sure. I feel confident that will have been dealt with, but if we want to double check that, we can. So that's the first important point. Yeah, I think if depending on what they mean by reporting, then I think absolutely the right thing has been done. Reporting's got to be seen through the eyes of a victim, and I don't know what it's like to sit every victim's position, journey through whatever they report and however they're dealing with it, whatever their trauma looks like to them will be different. So people will need the right encouragement at different times, and will need that kind of wraparound to give the details when they feel the time is right to them, with encouragement from services. So what I mean by that is that individual might feel that they could let Plymouth Community Homes know, but didn't want to make a formal crime complaint because they just weren't mentally in that place to do it. And if we put the right wraparound, hopefully one day they would be able to give further details. Alternatively, they might have, by saying they've reported to Devon and Cornwall Police, they might have made a full crime complaint and given a statement. I just don't know. But if you go through within the pack that you've got third-party centres all listed out there, race equality councillors amongst them, any one of those people will pick it up and make sure that we've got, as far as that victim is allowing in the information they're given at that time, that they're able to do as much as they can. So quite a long-winded way, but I just think it's important we understand there are far more opportunities to report now than just am I prepared to have a police officer at my house and make a statement. It sounds like all those have gone through, which is good news. And I'm glad that that individual's felt confident enough in that something was going to happen, presumably that they've made the report in the first place. What can councillors do? I just ask you all to be, I suppose there's a number of things. The main is that I would hope that you all know sector inspectors that work in your area. So if you feel that you need to step into that space to offer that level of support I've just referred to several times, that's a really good route to go in. That's a way that we can just help people on what will be a very difficult experience for them. And if that's not the way, then again, just signposting people to the third party. Hate crime has such a massive impact on people that just to expect people to email in or ring 101 is not enough. You'd be amazed how many people do take that route, but more often than not, it will need just that a face, a name I recognise, and it may well be that councillors can play that part and make those introductions. So I think that's the main thing. Know your sector inspectors, sign up to the Councillor Advocate Scheme if you can, and just use that to introduce the right people.
Could I maybe also suggest that one of our team talks to you afterwards, Mark, to make sure that we've got victim support and everything else lined up, and is then able to feed back into the police, because they do work closely together. What that does sound like, though, is repeat victimisation, and I think that does sound like we need to be ensuring that those few people who do suffer repeat victimisation, it is the smaller majority, there's the small number of people, not the majority of people, who report hate crimes, report repeat victimisation. We do especially support those, especially if it's happening in their homes, because that really matters. I'm going to not come straight to you, Sally. I'm going to give Councillor Harrison a chance to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's, hopefully you'll be able to answer this. I was told by a police officer that Have Your Say meetings were really not part of the agenda anymore. Obviously, we've talked just now about reporting crimes. Some residents may not be comfortable or not be able to report on, online, or be able to feel comfortable to sit for an hour, perhaps on 101, trying to get through. Sometimes the public facing is the right way to go. So is there a direction, is there of travel in terms of things like Have Your Say meetings, particularly ones where councillors might also be will be alongside, so that we can be working together? Or is that a thing of the past, and it's people should be just going straight to the police?
So no, it's not a thing of the past at all, and I'm grateful for the question. If anybody's got that misconception, and misconception it is, there might be, I don't know why an officer said that, and I will make every opportunity going back based on that, but actually was anyway, to set out what this needs to look like going forward. I think there might be there was a bit of a branding thing a little while ago with various kind of names put on these. If people who've been around long enough will remember packed meetings, police communities together. So it might be whether that particular reference of a meeting's gone and confused things, I don't know. But the important part is, I just don't think you can place enough value on police officers being out in the streets and being accessible to others. Trying a whole load, I don't want to get too off track, but it's an important question to answer. So, for example, we've just invested in a load of GPS trackers, so we're going to give them to beat officers who, as they're walking around their patch, can then put up a map and show people where they're about in their patch, just to try and show people we are out there. Of course, we're not hoping people bump into us by chance. That would be ridiculous. So you do need those meetings that you just referred to. And there have been a few recently, I know, because I got quizzed slightly on the attendance by councillors who were invited to it. So I know they are happening. I'd like to see them happening more. We've got a new Chief Constable who's arrived with us now, Chief Constable Will Kerr, has made it very clear that one of his directions is in investment in local policing, more accessible policing, and a building of confidence in policing, all of which is critical if you want to improve service to hate crime. So you will see more police out there, you will see us putting more police back on the streets, and you will see them in events that are either in an informal route, as you see them out and about. In fact, you might even see me out and about, because I've done a number of foot patrols recently. But also it's important that you have that scheduled and structured way as well, so people know where they can meet people, such as the meetings.
Thank you. Just supplementary. I mean, I tracked mine down by physically seeing them with their coffee and cops and arriving, with my coffee to sit next to them. But unfortunately, I had invited them to come to our neighbourhood meeting where residents did have concerns, and those weren't able to be addressed at that point. Hence, I tracked them down at another opportunity to have that face-to-face with them.
So I think, if I may, there's an opportunity for you to help us here. So I was out with the beat officer in the city centre the other day and was still finding people within the city centre footprint going, oh, how do we get you to come to a meeting? When that person's really frustrated because they're in every way they can, they're saying, we will come to your meeting. So it's kind of just joining the two. So when you hear that, come to us again, go to your sector inspector and say that you've got another willing audience. I think we just need to be smart about it, because there was a time we were doing so much of it that I had officers sitting for hours on end to have a coffee with the same person, the same one person and their dog. Week after week. So that's, we've got to be smart about it, but wherever in any of your areas you go out and you say you find a community that needs a meeting, half an hour of time, let us know. We will absolutely be there.
I think the actual branding of Have Your Say became more relaxed when I was chair of the Community Safety Partnership, and at that point it was very prescribed that police officers, councillors, various other strategic partners would all turn up and sit in a room for an hour with whoever came up from their communities in every single neighbourhood in the city. And we were getting quite a lot of them where it was the same people coming each time, and they were outnumbered by the people sitting there to talk to them, and we were wasting a lot of resource on not a lot of impact. So we said, this needs to happen, but it needs to happen in appropriate ways in every part of the city. I think what might have happened by not having the same thing happening everywhere, and I'd say this from my ward, is we've ended up with almost nothing happening in some cases. So I think you're right to raise this, because those are some of the places where relationships can happen, and actually people can feel confident about reporting hate crime or hearing about results, because those are very localised, and you can build relationships. And sometimes you need trust, because if you are a member of a community that is not visible in terms of, oh, I look at you and see, actually you have to come out to a police officer to report the crime, and that can be scary as well. So, and I know in the past I haven't reported hate crime because I haven't felt confident about coming out as who I am to a police officer, and that isn't good. So that would not be the case now, but I have different relationships now.
I think that's post-pandemic and lockdown. I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment, actually. I think we may have shrunk away from some things that we're working very hard to get into. And it feels to me that structured in a sense of timetabled, here's where we might be advertised, yes. Structured in a sense of same panel of people, no, that's a really bad idea. Local policing is not complicated. In fact, the whole service as a safer Plymouth is not complicated. You need to do it as informally as you can to build the trust and relationships. So that's what we're aiming to do, and I'll take feedback on that any time, because it's a really important part of what we're trying to do.
And can I say how encouraging it is to hear that the new Chief Constable is telling you what he told us as the Police and Crime Panel at his confirmation hearing, because it is traditional across the whole country for every new Chief Constable, prospective Chief Constable, to tell the Police and Crime Panel that they're going to do more neighbourhood policing. And for most parts of the country, it doesn't happen. So I'm really pleased that in his early days, the new Chief is doing as he promised he would.
And I'm really pleased you said that if we're being televised.
Before I come to you, Sally, I just want to raise something that we were given a performance report that's not yet been to Cabinet today at our meeting. And one of the bits of evidence in it, one of our key council KPIs, is the percentage of city survey respondents who think their local area is a place where people from different backgrounds get on well together. Now, we did have a big uplift in 2021 to 55%. From 39, but it's dropped back to 42, and it's being said, oh, that's purely COVID. Well, there'd been a lot of work done on community cohesion, and I think part of the uplift might well have been because we've been doing lots of work on community cohesion, not just because of COVID. And the drop back is being suggested it's purely because of the post-COVID neighbourliness changing. And I think that might be a misconception too, given that we are seeing more hate crime being reported. It's not a now and something, but I just think if people are feeling that they get on less well with people from other backgrounds, that could be a sort of fermenting ground for hate to grow. And if we were to look, we don't want Brianna from Wakefield to be someone from Plymouth. And Brianna was at school, and so were her murderers. there is something here about how people get on and how we do things. So I just wanted to flag that to you, because I think it's a little bit of a KPI that, say, for Plymouth might not consider, because it's just stuck in a report, but actually might be a flag for something. We have asked for a lot more information on that to be shared with the Equalities Working Group on demographic and spread across the city, but I just thought it was worth flagging. And the other thing I want to flag is we asked for outputs or outcomes to be here. We never hear about what happens to people who report hate crime. And some of the figures here they're sort of on par with other crimes, but actually if people knew that cases were followed up, that there were things happening, don't need to say exactly what, but that would be an enormously positive message to get through into the communities who we need to report hate crime. Because there is stuff happening, and one of the reasons we asked for the figures was none of us knew. And I think people in communities, especially communities with protected characteristics, need to know that if they say something to the police, it'll be acted on and treated seriously. So could Safe for Plymouth look a little bit at how that is appropriately talked about, because I think celebrating success really matters.
Yes, of course, got that.
Sally, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise for asking so many questions. That's what happens when you read the papers. Earlier on, we had, sorry, Matt, I'm giving you a break. I'll go to the Cabinet member. Are you okay? Councillor Patel, earlier on we had a paper on the policy brief. Plymouth Prevent Partnership is developing a 3-year Plymouth Prevent action plan. Just would like you to talk to me a little bit more about it. I just need to feel a little bit more confident about it, especially after what we've heard in the news the last couple of days regarding the Kiam and things like that. So I'm not asking you to go into that sort of detail, but I just need to be made more comfortable. So I just wonder if you'd like to tell me a little bit more about it, please.
So I'll be quite honest with you, I haven't been briefed on this one yet, and nothing's come to me yet, so I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, so Tracy Naismith, I'm the Ops Manager in Community Connections, and I'm not going to speak on Siobhan's behalf, but between us, Siobhan's been working actually on that action plan, and I'm currently the Plymouth Chair of our Channel panel. So the Shawcross report which you're referring to is obviously a long overdue report into how we tackle under the contest umbrella, the prevent elements of that. For those of you who aren't overly familiar, that is how we prevent terrorism in our city particularly. The action plan that's been developed, I can see Siobhan's got her laptop here. Are you going to be okay to just do a quick 2-minute brief in a sec? It's a little bit unexpected, but it's fine. But in terms of the Shawcross report itself, there are 4 main elements of that report that we need to focus on as a city, and they've been brought into the Prevent Partnership. The 4 main elements are similarly how we share a different narrative into our communities to the one that's sometimes portrayed in the media. So where there's any misconceptions around what Prevent is and what it's trying to do, that actually the Home Office will tackle that head on, and they will start to be a little bit more open around and transparent around what Prevent's trying to do. The second strand of that is how we then work with elected members and other community members to make sure that we all understand how Prevent in the southwest, although it looks slightly different in the southwest, we still nationally have to come together to tackle it. The main thing, I guess, around reassuring you in relation to the development of the action plan is that was done with a Home Office specialist who came into the meeting. He presented, and a risk assessment tool was used, which he has used in every Prevent partnership in the southwest. So he has almost benchmarked where we are as a city to understand how confident we are as a city that we can respond well and react to any intelligence we might receive, and then develop that plan to move forward. Could you just give me 2 seconds? Yeah. so just, can you hear me all right? Following on from what Tracy said, then the action plan at the moment is very much a draft format, and that's coming from the risk assessment that was recently completed as part of our local Prevent meeting. That risk assessment took place. And now the action plan is in draft format with the hope that it will be possibly in preparation and ready to be presented at our next Prevent meeting in March. So that's the aim, to have it presented at that moment.
So are you feeling confident then? That's what I want to hear. You are feeling
Yeah,
confident.
absolutely. So the Shawcross report in particular was long awaited, and we wanted to really wait for that report. So we didn't create an action plan that then didn't tie in very well with that report. So yeah, extremely confident. The partnership is a really strong partnership. It's well attended. It's really well brought into, and regularly reviewed and peer reviewed, and having the Home Office regional advisor, he's a standing member, so he's able to really guide us to ensure that we are confident and that we're able to deliver. So yeah, the action plan, once it's fully drafted and finalised, obviously you will obviously all have sight, and there may be an opportunity for elected members to be kind of given a little bit of a briefing around that.
And I thank you, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot there. I certainly know it was well overdue, but I'm more pleased to see that you've now started going forward, and and you feel confident that you're going forward. It's probably another recommendation, so I've got 2 recommendations out of today's session. Thank you, Chair.
I'm not spotting any more hands. It's actually been quite a wide-ranging discussion, and having been involved in a number of these, sitting on that side, or sort of within and on that side of the panel over the course of years, I think it's probably one of the better discussions we've had on the work of the Community Safety Partnership, because we've just looked at something small, but looked at it in some depth. And I think a big thank you to the officers from both the police and the council who pulled together that pack that was really quite insightful and helpful. So, starting there, quite how to word the recommendation, I don't know. I think maybe we ask for this to be looked at from an education and children's perspective by that scrutiny panel, so that we look at the link between schools and the Community Safety Partnership and reporting and education, and what that means as a whole package. I think we've touched on it in all sorts of conversations today, and I appreciate that, and to be fair, I've worked quite a lot with Matt and their teams over the last few months as we've prepared for today. It's not something that crosses their agenda, and our recommendation in terms of going to that panel for review would be for some solid recommendations to the Community Safety Partnership about how to best build links into schools and other children and youth settings to ensure that we help tackle hate crime. And I'm seeing the current chair nodding her head, which is good news, because I think that actually encompasses quite a lot of what we've talked about today. Sally, you've talked a lot about education. Do you think that covers your perspectives on that?
Yeah, it certainly does. The other 2 recommendations is totally different, so if we just concentrate on that one, I'm more than happy with that.
So people happy with that as our first recommendation, and probably our big one from today, because I think that could be really transformative in terms of victims and prevention of future work. A small one, but actually, we've had a pile of paper here, but just a quick hints and tips for members on dealing with hate crime might be quite useful. Once it's developed, if it's given to Ross, it can go on the member page, the member landing page of the website, and be issued in one of the weekly bulletins. Just, this is where you go, this is how you help people. Here's some useful information about different things on hate crime, because we've spent a bit of time getting into it today, not everyone will. I think obviously it's good that Prevent is working in a potentially slightly different way, a more open way, and a way that appears, if I'm honest, less racist and targeting specific religions and on a more open way. I think given that history and some of the mistrust in a national programme, I'm not saying that's the local programme, it's very much the national programme, and because of the experience of Keyham where it wasn't a race crime, actually it was misogyny, and we've not talked a lot today about misogyny and the fact misogyny isn't a protected characteristic, it's covered by gender and therefore not really reported on in terms of women and girls, and maybe that's a whole different debate, that it would be useful if there was an opportunity for members to engage before the plan is finalised, just so that there is some confidence from members about Prevent. What that looks like, I don't know. I'm not going to say at the moment that should be a scrutiny, but if we put it on as a recommendation that's looked at, then maybe, Matt, your team could work with sort of Safer Plymouth and Democratic Support about whether we have a workshop or something for all members rather than just a particular panel. And you had another one, Sally, I seem to have missed.
So it was definitely about what we've just talked about. And the other one is Councillor Patel said that sadly the funding had stopped from, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to say the Home Office. Yeah, so I don't know if we should do a recommendation to ask the Cabinet member to lobby for more funding to specifically help our under-18s, prevention of drugs, because our under-18s is our future, aren't they? And maybe I'm feeling a bit too touchy after what I've witnessed last weekend down in my own ward, but I really do think if local politicians aren't arguing for funding, then nobody is going to. So unfortunately it falls on the Cabinet member, Councillor Patel, and this part. So I don't know how other people feel
I
about
spotted
that.
Councillor Patel's hand going up, and I'm sure he's about to say yes to that. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. But any other thoughts from the panel before I ask him to make any comment? Councillor Patel, did you want to?
Yeah, I think our best course of action here for funding is through the PCC, Police and Crime Commissioner. They've just given a hell of a lot of money for youth work throughout Devon to one group. Unfortunately, that won't have the effect we want it to have. But I think if we, through the Community Safety Partnership and everyone else, make the case for Plymouth through the PCC, we're much more likely to succeed for money for Plymouth to do work with specifically under-18s and the prevention of drugs and the education and everything else. I think I'm quite happy to do that. I think Home Office is going to be a difficult one to crack.
Chair, can I be really cheeky and say, can we do both? We might get one or the other.
Yes, and just because...
Don't try, you don't get, do you? That's my motto.
To be quite honest, obviously, we can only request you, Councillor, but if you choose not to write, that would be your prerogative. If you write and they don't reply, you might wish to make an issue of the fact that the Home Secretary doesn't wish to support tackling underage drug use in Plymouth. There's no harm in that. You can lose campaigns as well as win them sometimes. Councillor Lowry.
Just picking up on this theme, which is money related in reality, given the changes in the issues that exist in Safer Plymouth, I wonder if there's any merit in going to the Police and Crime Commissioner, considering she's putting everyone's council tax up by a shed load of money very shortly, that we ask her that we have that money back to focus on the areas that are of concern to us. It's a pretty obvious ask. If we don't do it on Monday at full council, perhaps we'll do it for you.
Thank you. It would be an interesting one. I know I have challenged the Police and Crime Commissioner and the previous Police and Crime Commissioner on a number of times. Between 8 and 10% of the crime in Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly effectively happens in St Peter and the waterfront. So I've asked for 8 to 10% of the resource of the police authority to be devoted to prevention and tackling in St Peter and the waterfront, on the basis that if we did that, we'd go to the bottom of the national scales and everyone's home insurance and car insurance across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly would drop. I've been promised walkarounds by both of them, and neither of them have yet taken me up on or followed that through with a promise to walk around. But yes, I agree, we should be asking for the money from Plymouth to come back to Plymouth. And I have no problem writing that letter if you would like me to write that letter to OPCC. Save you writing a letter there, Councillor. She can get one from both of us. So we have there, on top of issues with education and prevent, letters around funding for under-18s drugs from Councillor Patel as the Cabinet member, to both the Home Secretary and OPCC, and a letter from me to OPCC about funding levels for Plymouth, given the money we put in, but also the disproportionate amount of crime, not only hate crime, but other crime that we experience in the city compared to the rest of the patch. Anything else? People happy with those as recommendations? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for allowing us to go off track at times. I think that's been a really helpful session for us. I hope it has for you as well.
It has, and can I just say a thanks to all the support you give, not to policing but to Safer, to help us grapple some of these issues, but also just how nice it's been within Safer and some of the other wider work to just the city gets behind this, to have representatives for working with refugees in the city, partners much further than the statutory ones that you have to have within the community partnership. There really is a huge buy-in, and I would also like to pass some thanks on to Siobhan as well, who had the unenviable task of trying to turn my chaotic mind into the pack you had before you. So it was nice of you to thank us, but actually the thanks needs to go to Siobhan. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you. There is one item left on the agenda, which is the forward work plan. We've carried over and still have some bits on. Can I just whip down through them? They're on page 226 of the pack. We did a controlled parking zones, and it was going to come back, but it was rather woolly. Can I suggest we take controlled parking zones off the work plan until we have something solid to actually talk about with it? Because otherwise it just sits there. We have some yet to be allocated dates. Those relate predominantly to the results we got from the big staff survey listening event at our last meeting. I think those should stay on. The elections is scheduled for next autumn. Next summer, the next bereavement services update, looking at transition and the future of Western Mill and Efford. I think those should stay on. We still have select committee reviews to agree for the customer services strategy, which won't be this municipal year. So next municipal year will be your third year at trying that one. So we'll get that one done. We have undertaken the review of the Plymouth Community Covenant, so that one can come off. The Diversity and Action, Equality and Diversity Action Plan can come off. I would suggest that we leave homelessness on, given that we have currently over 200 households, and that's both singles and families, in bed and breakfast accommodation. That's a big budget pressure. Community empowerment might be useful to hear, though actually there's been some briefings, so my suggestion might be that we take that one off as a select committee, given that we've started hearing member briefings from the team. So unless anything then crops up to scrutinise the programmes in operation, and actually two of the community builders that are an element of one of the 5 strands are sitting in the room with us at the moment. So I think that's there. The review of the corporate estate, I think, was a budget recommendation from last year, so we should leave on the work out how to do. So that slims down that work programme that we've bought from the beginning of the year to going forward to a lot, though we have added a few bits today. People were happy with that as a work programme. On that basis, can I say to members, thank you very much for your work over the last municipal year. This is our last meeting. We have covered an enormous range of stuff. We've done some really important things, so much so that we've extended meetings, put extra meetings in, and done select committees. So thank you for all of the work you've done on that. We really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you on the other side of May, when we might be sitting in the same or different seats. Who knows? But whatever happens, scrutiny will be happening next year, and I think we've left the new panel, whoever they may be, with a good solid base to work from. So thank you for your efforts in that. Councillor Lowry.
Chair, on behalf of the committee, can we also pay our thanks to your excellent stewardship, along with Councillor Finn, and the support from the officers in making this a very successful committee over the past 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry we overran today, but I think we've had a good meeting.